Welcome, everyone. I now call the October 8th, 2024 regular City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, we'll take a moment to take roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Thank you. Councilmember Zorns?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here.
Councilmember Aldorks?
Here.
Councilmember Kurd?
Here.
Councilmember Menke?
Here.
Councilmember Dodd?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Before we continue with the rest of the agenda, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. Mute your microphone when not speaking. And for council attending remotely, please use the raise hand feature when you wish to speak. Also, as we are in election season, I'd like to remind everyone of certain campaign-related restrictions regarding public comment on ballot measures. Public speakers generally cannot specifically address a campaign or ballot measure at a public meeting or during the public comment period. RCW 4217A555 prohibits government agencies from allowing the use of public facilities directly or indirectly for campaign purposes. Allowing speakers to speak in favor of or in opposition to a ballot measure or campaign during a public meeting or during a public comment period would violate this prohibition. However, I note that agenda item 1A, the limited public hearing regarding initiative measure number 2117, will allow for presentation and comment tonight, pursuant to a narrow exception provided under the statute. If you wish to speak on initiative measure number 2117, please wait until agenda item 8A. Moving on to meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to tonight's meeting? Seeing none, we will move on to proclamations. We have one today. Oh, no public engagement opportunities. Thank you, clerk. First up is our Kinship with Salmon, Indigenous Traditions and Sustainability. It's Monday, October 14th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Cascadia College, Mobius Hall. You can join Cascadia College, UW-Bothell, Lake Washington School District, and the City of Bothell to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day with this free event. Living with Beavers webinar, Monday, October 14th, 6:30 to 7 on Zoom. You can learn about coexisting with beavers on your property, resolving conflicts, and opportunities for assistance from your local conservation district. We've also got an open house, the Park at Bothell Landing's Conceptual Design Project, Thursday, October 17th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. right here at City Hall. You can learn about the refined conceptual design for the Park at Bothell Landing. Project consultants will provide details and collect feedback about the park's development. Now, we're going to move on to a proclamation. We've got one today for Arbor Day. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed that a special day be set aside for planting trees, and Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas 2024 is the 152nd anniversary of the holiday, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and across the world. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and beautifying our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and renewal. And whereas the Bothell Parks and Recreation Board will celebrate Arbor Day on October 12th, 2024 by planting trees and shrubs at Blythe Park. Now, therefore, I, Mason Thompson, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim October 12th, 2024 as the official celebration of Arbor Day in the City of Bothell, and urge all in our community to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands and plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. And I believe we have Scott Purdy and Laurel Cyrus here to accept.
Yes, thank you so much. Please join us this Saturday at Blythe Park from 10 a.m. to noon to celebrate Arbor Day. This will be our 25th year celebrating Arbor Day for the City of Bothell. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Purdy.
And Laurel.
Yes. I just know Scott better, so I'm more comfortable like giving him direct attention from up here during a council meeting. So sorry, Laurel, I didn't mean to ignore you. All right, next up is public comment. The city has accepted public comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all city council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please note that council will receive your input, but we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. As a reminder, if you wish to speak on initiative measure number 2117, please wait until agenda item 8A. City clerk?
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. We do not have anybody signed up to speak this evening. However, I will call on the audience in a moment in case there's anybody in the audience who does wish to speak. We did receive 2 written comments, one from Mary Evans regarding the comprehensive plan's historic and cultural resources, and another from Ashu Joshi regarding Lot P self-donation to Bothell United Methodist Church. And those are made part of the record. And again, I don't have anybody who signed up to speak live. However, if there is anybody in the audience who wishes to do so, Mr. Swanson, please step to the podium. You'll have 3 minutes. And if you're online and wish to speak, please use the raise hand function unless you're speaking about Initiative 2117. We'll call on that later. Thank you.
My name is Mark Swanson. I've lived in Bothell since 1991, live on West Hill. I got a laundry list here I'm going to try to get through. Bob Keeney to the river was supposed to be parking. From the Listen Burnett Center to the river, it was supposed to be parking. 527 wasn't supposed to be a throughput. UW Bothell was not supposed to be a residential college. It was only supposed to be a commuter college. Well, what happened to that? The election was originally going to be open space. Then it morphed into an anchor retail space with parking. Now it's going to be residence for 700 additional people commute in and out of the city. Another bait and switch. HB 1110 stipulates that the Office of Financial Management is to be used for county growth projections. HB 1110. So why are we using Puget Sound Regional Council, which doesn't even have any jurisdiction over us, to arrive at hybrid 2.5, which is going to allow you birds to increase the population around here by 35,000 renters? HB 1220, sponsored by our marvelous Shelley Kloba, stipulates no damage to the environment. That includes intercity buses, the tire wear particles. That includes creating a heat zone out of Lot P, a $16 million property we're just giving away because they're a favored BOPOP member. The comp plan says not to put any intrusive uses into the neighborhoods. And we have Jenny Aldrichs wanting to turn our residential low into a place for, as Carrie Westerbeck likes to call it, bodegas. Bodegas. That, if we use a Spanish word, is that better than AM, PM? There has been no quorum in either the City Council or the Planning Commission for 4 years because of the BOPOP conflict of interest. There's no affordable housing problem. Rents now are cheaper than they were 30 years ago when indexed to minimum wage. Buses produce 100 to 200 times more tire wear particles than a single family car, and yet you guys are jamming buses Kaysner Way. When we hit 80,000 population, are we all of a sudden going to have buses going up Kaysner Way that has 5 people?
Mr. Swanson, your time is up.
Your time is up. Thank you.
I want to remind the council that the Open Public
Mr. Swanson,
Meetings Act
Mr.
does
Swanson,
not
public, your time is over.
prescribe a 3-minute limit.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak? If so, please step to the podium and state your name. I have one person online who's raised their hand. Dakota, if you are talking about, I know you signed up to speak regarding I-2117. We will get to that item later. However, I'm going to panel you in case you want to speak just under general public comment.
Thank you for the opportunity. This isn't about 2117 yet. I'm hoping it's okay for me to double dip. My name is Dakota Rash. I just want to briefly say that I have attended a whole lot of public comment sessions, and I'm always really impressed with how Bothell conducts theirs. So thank you all for the hard work you're doing. I really think Bothell's doing a lot to help its people. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to panel you out, and we'll get back to you when we get to item 8A. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have reports. I'm going to call on the city manager report, and he'll announce the presenters.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and good evening, Council, both near and far. Tonight, we do have 3 presentations on the city manager report, and I'm excited to welcome first up our University of Washington Bothell Chancellor, Dr. Kristin Esterberg. I think there's something special about fall in the beginning of a school year. I know January is when we often think of a new year, but there's something still intrinsic about September starting afresh. So we're pleased to hear a report for a campus, and I believe this is the 3rd year that Dr. Esterberg has been here in Bothell. So we're excited to hear what's happening. Great. Thanks for being here tonight.
Great. Thank you very much. Mayor, council members, staff, guests, my name is Kristin Esterberg, and I'm very proud to serve as the Chancellor of the University of Washington Bothell. And indeed, it is, I am entering into my 4th year as Chancellor of this extraordinary institution. I want to share a few short reflections about our university and our partnership with the city before I leave a little bit of time to respond to any questions you might have. We are celebrating our 35th anniversary this year, and since UW-Bothell held its first classes in the fall of 1990, our mission has been to provide people in our region with access to an excellent, affordable University of Washington education right here in the city of Bothell. And in many ways, our mission and our vision align with those of the city that we call home. Through all 5 of our schools, business, educational studies, interdisciplinary arts and sciences, nursing and health studies, and STEM, we are committed to building the regional workforce. We are committed to developing business and community leaders. We need to ensure that our city and our surrounding communities can flourish. We are also committed to working with and for all kinds of organizations within the region, from the city itself to business and industry partners to nonprofits and other educational institutions, including Cascadia College, with whom we share our beautiful campus. Now, it's not a surprise, I think, to anybody that college presidents and chancellors like myself have been thinking a lot about democracy over this last year, and certainly much longer than that. And as a sociologist, I have been paying particularly close attention to how politics and our community well-being intertwine in periods of unrest, such as we are now experiencing. We are, across the 3 campuses of the University of Washington, actively exploring questions about how we prepare our students to live and work and thrive in a civic democracy, under a theme we call Democracy and Dialogue. This includes, on the Bothell campus and on the other campuses, a variety of presentations, workshops, opportunities for discussion, and other events on everything from freedom of speech and misinformation to mental health and well-being. And most importantly, how can we have productive conversations across lines of difference? We take very seriously our responsibility to help our students, as well as our faculty and staff, be grounded and engaged members of our community. Indeed, I believe education is essential to creating a thriving civil society for everyone. And it's perhaps the most important work that our university can do at this moment, at this time, to invest in our human connections, in learning, in dialogue, and in our democracy. Now, a key part of our commitment to helping our local community flourish is our focus on environmental sustainability, and I hope you will come on campus to learn more about the salmon and beavers and the other wildlife that call our campus home. I am very pleased to report that we continue to be nationally recognized for our work in the environment. In the latest rankings that were released just a few weeks ago, we remain #1 in the United States for the sustainability of our grounds program. We are #2 for our treatment of water runoff, and we are ranked #10 in sustainable practices in construction and building operations. This is an extraordinary achievement, and our ongoing work includes the ongoing stewardship of that gorgeous 58-acre restored wetland in the North Creek. It's a living laboratory for our faculty, our students, and local community organizations. And the path on campus along the wetlands edge is a resource for everyone, including every member of our community who wants to either get some exercise or just connect more closely with the natural environment to see when the salmon are running, to see salmon run on our campus. Thousands of crows, salmon, beavers, and other wildlife and plants still make their homes in our wetland and in the other green spaces on our pesticide-free campus. I am so proud of the work of our faculty, our staff, and the students who spend countless hours caring for this environment. And I invite you all to come onto campus to see firsthand the work that they do. If you remember just one thing from today, please remember that UW-Bothell is your regional public university. It belongs to all of us in this community. And if you remember two things, and I hope you do, I hope you remember that the city of Bothell is an extraordinary resource for our campus, for our diverse population of 6,000 students, about 600 of whom live on campus right now, and for our 700+ faculty and staff, and for our more than 33,000 alumni. You may not know that 90% of our alumni stay in Washington to live and work after graduation. More than 22,000 of them live within just 20 miles of our campus, which means so many of them are residents of this beautiful city. This deep connection between our campus and the city has taken a big step forward this year. With the start of our fall quarter just a few weeks ago, we completed construction of our new residential village at the north end of our campus along Beardsley Boulevard. I thank you for your patience during our construction phase, and I invite you to come on to our campus and see the housing for 600 students, as well as the dining pavilion, a convenience store, and very soon a coffee shop, all of which are open to the larger community. The open pedestrian walkway that begins on Beardsley makes getting to our walking and bike path even more accessible. And I hope that you will come onto campus through that entranceway and see our gorgeous students, our amazing faculty, and our staff. So we hope that this new Beardsley Boulevard entrance to our campus, which we think of as a gateway between our city, our beautiful city, and our gorgeous campus, will be a visible invitation for all of you to come onto a campus, to engage with us, and a place for us to engage with each other and develop further our town-gown partnership. So thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and I'm pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Curd.
Thank you, Dr. Esterberg, for being here, for sharing more about the campus that it's so obvious that you love and we share all together. I am so encouraged by the communication and outreach that the university and Cascadia both do to the surrounding city. Social media that comes out has really timely information about events that the public is welcome to, and I'm just really appreciative that you're such a great partner for our city and our community.
Thank you.
One of the things that I'm encouraged about as the campus kind of grows and evolves is its connection to transit. And transit is one of the ways that we can reduce the impact of vehicles in our community and make it more sustainable. And so I'm really hopeful that the transit partnerships that are being forged and are being maintained are really critical to the university as you plan future extensions and growth.
Great, thank you. And I will say that our The buses that take students, faculty, and staff to our campus are a critical part of our master plan because we know that so many of our campus community relies on buses to get to campus, and that commitment is unwavering. Awesome. I'm also saying, as a cyclist myself, I love that we have so many folks who commute to campus via bicycle as well.
That is awesome. Yes. I just have nothing but just being impressed by how campus is changing and growing, and the sustainability features and natural spaces that are being curated on campus are just amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. Happy 35th anniversary. It's a lot to think about. I'm 2 years older than UW Bothell, and I appreciate that since that first fall that you've evolved. Our needs as a community, your needs as a college have all changed. Since I just outed myself as 37, what I do today is not the same as what I thought I would be doing when I was 27 or 17. When I was 7, I wanted to test roller coasters. That hasn't panned out. So I just really appreciate what a good partner you are in the community and that you've pivoted. And those 600 students, while a small part of your student population, don't have to travel at all to get to class.
Exactly.
And it really shows that you're kind of living out those sustainability values. So I really appreciate that. Councilmember Curd's note about transportation made me think I never went to UW Bothell or Cascadia, but I commuted through it to go to Lake Washington Technical College for 1.5 years. So I was there every day on the bus. And whenever we visit, it always makes me think of that time. So I'm glad to hear that about the master plan. Thank you.
Councilmember Aldrichs.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chancellor, for being here. I really appreciate that you've reviewed all of the sustainability practices that you've been recognized for, and it really is a testament to our community that our local university is recognized nationally in all of those many ways. And as you were sharing that, it brought to mind the fact that we are currently doing our city's comprehensive plan. And for the first time ever, we are required by state law to have a climate element in it. And I just want to ask if we can look to you at the university, and especially the faculty and students, for keeping us honest when it comes to addressing climate mitigation and the work that we have as a community. And I would just very much love to look to you, to your university as partners in those efforts.
Yeah.
So thanks again for being here. But yeah,
thank you.
I know that on campus we have people who are very knowledgeable and passionate and care deeply about what is evidence-based and what is best practice. And I would like to think that those partnerships can help guide our work at the city too.
We would be delighted. We have some of the most amazing faculty, research, and undergraduate student working in that area, and would be thrilled to partner with the city on this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chancellor. Always good to see you.
Great to see you.
I wanted to emphasize something that you mentioned of serving the local community here. I am a parent of 2 children. They're old. No, they go to college. They don't like to be called children.
Yeah.
I have 3, but they 2 go to college. I know. Thank you for the reminder. I have 3. Oops.
It's not that late.
Need more coffee. I do have. You guys, don't distract me. The 2 go to college. The younger one's not there yet. But yeah, thank you. It's amazing to have such a amazing resource here in our community, because it's hard to see your kids. I was talking to the city manager, move away to go to school elsewhere. Having a prestigious institution right there in your backyard is a godsend, at least for me. So thank you. I also visited a few months ago with Ryan, the new dining hall here a few months ago. It's beautiful. I'm seeing the new residences get up there makes us think that maybe the city needs to help improve the off-campus life a bit also to make it more of a vibrant community.
We've been very grateful for the Chamber of Commerce and businesses in the Chamber of Commerce really thinking creatively and actively about what do students need and how do they serve our community. So I think that's another example of a really wonderful partnership between the university and a local organization.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think it's my turn. I really just wanted to kind of circle back to something you said earlier about just teaching students how to engage civically. I really appreciate that you're teaching kids how to engage and how we make decisions corporately, which is really just what we're doing here is who do we want to be? And the tenor of our political discussion, both locally and especially nationally, is not great. And I am really hopeful that in the future we can collectively have a more healthy discussion around what it means to make decisions together and who we want to be. So thanks. I'm rooting for the kids.
Good. Thank you, Mayor. And I will say, I am so proud of our work on constructive dialogue. We've been doing it for the 3 years since I've been here. And I think that it is critical to our democracy that we all learn how to have that dialogue across difference.
Absolutely. Also, just want to, since we've got you here, appreciate the asset that you guys are to the city of Bothell, and not just the physical location and the fact that there's a school, but the relationships that we have working on, different initiatives between staff to staff, but also your students and faculty who move here and become residents and then get involved. And we've have some on our boards and commissions. We hear them come in and speak to us sometimes, and it's really cool to see how that relationship is evolving with time. And I'm really looking forward to figuring out how we can better connect the university and the school over time.
Great, thank you.
And I really appreciated your answer to Councilmember Curd's comment on the transit partnership, because that's going to be a really critical piece of everything we want to do around here. And just knowing you're an ally in that is super great.
Agreed.
So
thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
And thanks for coming tonight.
My pleasure. My deepest pleasure. Thank you for the service that you all do. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we'll see Dr. Esterberg next week, as well as we'll be getting a report from Dr. Eric Murray from Cascadia College next week as well. Our second report for tonight is a staff briefing, and similar to when we have projected agenda items, our deputy mayor began asking about what will Bothell be doing for the World Cup, about the moment that Seattle was mentioned as a host city. And so we want to start having more of a public dialogue about what are we planning to do. And so with that, we're going to hear from Danae McGee tonight, who is our tourism manager, of some of the steps that we're taking to prepare to welcome the world to our community in 2026. Danae.
Thank you so much, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. As Kyle mentioned, staff was asked to research the idea of hosting watch parties in Bothell during the Men's World Cup tournament beginning in June of 2026. The World Cup is the most watched sporting event globally, and soccer is the most played sport in the world. Held every 4 years, the tournament brings together the top 48 nation teams competing to be crowned the best team in the world. Argentina currently holds that title, and the last World Cup was hosted by France in 2022. The 2026 World Cup will feature several historic firsts. It's the first time there are 3 host nations, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and it's the first time there will be games played in Seattle. Host teams are automatically seeded into the tournament, and there are 6 matches scheduled at Lumen Field. So the United States will be automatically seeded into the tournament, and one of those games will be played at Lumen Field. Given soccer's immense popularity, the economic development opportunities for the Pacific Northwest will be substantial. Watch parties are typically hosted by restaurants or bars where people come together to watch televised sporting events. Sometimes you hear about watch parties occurring in parks or other outdoor settings where there's a very large screen and really big crowds. Most people do not attend games in person, so watch parties are a great opportunity for fans to come together and cheer on their team to victory. We researched options for watch parties in Bothell, and after several conversations with your Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, The recommendation is for council to partner with local businesses in Bothell that plan to host watch parties in their establishments. We propose dedicating $500 per watch party in marketing support. If funded, the marketing campaign will be hyper-localized, informing fans about all the venues in Bothell where they can attend World Cup soccer watch parties. This partnership will allow businesses to focus less on marketing and more on managing their overhead costs, ideally leading to profitability from these events. It's also recommended that marketing occur for some games rather than all 34 games in the tournament. Specifically, those games at Lumen Field, the games where the USA is featured, and the semifinals and final matches for a total of 10 watch party marketing opportunities in Bothell for a $5,000 commitment. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time, and also happy to do further research if that's what council desires. Thank you.
I'm going to break tradition and go first.
Okay.
Because I am curious. We have this whole pedestrianized block out here, and we have a few different businesses that would probably like to partner with us on that. Was there any discussion around doing events for those 10 games just right there?
On Main Street specifically? Well, the initial research that was done to have the screens and all the technology was somewhere right around $10,000 per game. We also have concerns about even having access to the screens. I think that there's going to be competition during the World Cup for other watch parties, most notably in bigger cities. The recommendation to have watch parties of our own was not necessarily an economic, so much of a ideal situation, as much as it just was that the members of LTAC that run businesses that are planning to host watch parties were really hoping that we would not necessarily compete with them by having our own watch parties.
Totally. Now, but we have a few businesses that are down there that presumably are the type of businesses that we would do that. So, you know, if there's a chance that instead of just like focusing on, say, one of those businesses on Main Street, we have a chance to kill 4 birds with one stone, I'd be really interested in seeing us, maybe not for all of the events, but, you know, maybe for the semifinals, the finals, you know, for a United States game, something like that. Maybe the one that's in Seattle, we can do a watch party. Like if we did just even a handful of those, I'd really like to see that. And I bet that if we're starting a few years early, we might be able to reserve some of that AV stuff.
So you're recommending that in addition to marketing the businesses that will be having watch parties, we also have a large screen on Main Street very close to where those businesses are also having watch parties?
Yeah, for a few of the events, maybe not for all 10, but it'd be fun to have that kind of event out there. I think we can see what council thinks.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thanks. Thank you for doing the research. As much as I tease Rami, oh, we're having a World Cup, like it's pretty exciting. So thank you, Deputy Mayor, for bringing it up. I'm not married to a location like Main Street, like the mayor mentioned, but I would like to see an option. I can understand the makeup of our LTAC board and why they would want to see that marketing promotion. I think that's a great idea. With the lead time we have, I would love to see an option that meets a different need, that's a group watch party, like kind of like picnic style, where maybe you can't go out to a restaurant and, you know, buy stuff the whole time you're there. There's probably going to be table time limits and everything, but you can gather in community and watch the game. So, and if we could explore creative ways to do that, like giant white sheet, like it's not perfect, but it's free and it's from your parks department. Like whatever we can do to get creative and offer an option just at a less costly, or actually zero cost, you know, entry for our community, I think that would be fantastic, just to share that World Cup love, because we don't get stuff like this very often. I think we've been trying to get the Olympics for a very long time, and it hasn't happened yet. So I would love to work those creative muscles and not create a competing party, but just create a party that really complements the excitement that's going to be around the region.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks for the research. City manager will know that I brought it up a couple weeks after Deputy Mayor, so you beat me to it, Rami, but I am really excited about it. I'm also cognizant of the fact that our vision is to build community, and while the economic side of the investment in marketing sounds really great, and that's something that a small investment probably has a big outcome for our businesses, our local businesses. I would like to kind of echo the sentiment of having maybe one, community watch party. I would also, I'm not sure the extent of your research, but I am aware that FIFA has some sorts of financial incentives for cities to do community events. Have you looked into that? Was that part of the research?
Not so much part of my research. I've talked to a couple of other tourism destinations nearby. They've had a couple meetings with FIFA, and I know that at the Seattle level, there's not necessarily we've been told there's not funding available, but I could certainly look into that in more detail.
There are some connections in the Bellevue Chamber that are organizing East Side related events, and maybe there's funding through that too. So that's another option to kind of look into that I'd consider.
I'll look into that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the research and the work that LTAC has done and what you're bringing forward to us tonight. I very much want to see ways that we could partner with the businesses on Main Street. I think that there is a chance that there's not enough seats and there's not enough screens to go around with the businesses on Main Street. And so having another screen where people can fill out and kind of spill out into the streets or see, the screens from multiple angles could be a really amazing community event. And that I can just imagine how just exciting that energy would be to show up in community with our neighbors and people who are visiting. I'm really glad that in the packet there was a description of the efforts to bring tourists into Bothell. I hope that as we think about the number of people who would be staying in our hotels and motels here in Bothell, that we might also be able to provide them with public transportation information and make it really easy. And maybe, I don't know if this could be a branded thing, but maps and transportation timetables so that people could easily get, from the park and ride to light rail to the stadium. Because we're not super close, but we're also not that far. And with a high demand event like this, where people are coming from all over the world, I do think that we will be able to have a big boom and in our businesses around World Cup. And so I'd like to see us supporting the visitors who are coming as tourists, but then also offering opportunities for them to hang out here in Bothell and experience our community in an event like what the mayor described. So thanks for listening.
Absolutely. The Begin at Bothell brand has already begun some work toward some of the ideas that you just mentioned, transportation being one of them, educating about Lumen Field and how to get there from Bothell, so that when it is time to begin marketing to our international audiences, once we know actually which countries are going to be in Seattle, we'll be ready to do that through the marketing campaign we already have in place.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Zorns.
I just wanted to say that I'm really impressed hearing council come up with ideas and staff, all the work they've been doing. If I ever need to plan a big party, complicated party, I'm going to put all your heads together. I just wanted to make one brief comment to remind the public that Parks has limited dollars on this, so I appreciate the desire to go look for more funds. And then LTAC is really strictly regulated for getting heads and beds and how much we can fund for an event. It's very, very specific. So all the more brainstorming, the better. That's the only comment that I wanted to make.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Danae. This is very exciting. For the record, I brought it up last year. I don't think we're comprehending how massive this is going to be. Massive. You're going to have people who want to go to Canada who can't stay in Canada, so they're going to stay in this area. People who want to go to Mexico who can't stay in Mexico, they're going to be here, or at least along the West Coast, or people like all over. So imagine tens and millions of people are going to be here. And given our geography, or topography, what is Mr. Geologist, how do you say it? Topography? Sure.
Sure.
Geotopography, as everybody's going to get squeezed. Everybody will be squeezed. And people will be in Bothell whether we like it or not. Like, they're going to be in Bothell.
Agreed.
So what is the best way to accommodate those folks, not just in the watch parties, which I love the use of our local business and marketing for them, get them all, giving the business that they need and they want. But we have amenities like the amphitheater, we have Main Street, as the mayor mentioned. Like, there are some things we can do. And if there's a need for a budget, we're in budget season. We can talk about these things and discuss if it's important enough for the council to have a conversation about. So watch parties is one thing, but the other thing is accommodation. Like I mentioned, people are going to want to stay places. And the more options we give them, the better it is for everybody. And I know we have limited hotels and all that stuff in Bothell, but what can we do? Like, to council members Zorns' point, so LTAC can do so much with the money, but if we can come up with a plan for our hotels to have more business, or Airbnb, whatever it is, like, do some sort of partnership and do that stuff to help us also accommodate all the visitors who are going to be in this area. I think that would be a good thing to look into as well, because it's going to be a lot of people. And it's, for somebody like me, I'm going to enjoy the action. Some people are not going to enjoy the action, so. The other thing, last thing, is called football. It's football.
Yes.
It's the real football. So just saying. But thank you so much for your work, and we look forward to having more conversations around this. And if we need to brainstorm in a study session, let's do it.
All right, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danae. Appreciate the presentation.
All right, last up tonight is just a quick appetizer for next week. So as noted in your packet, we are going to begin the conversations around the budget for 25 to 26 next week. And that's based on the preliminary budget recommendation from the city manager. We've certainly been having activities that we have been talking about budget leading into this throughout the year. As noted in the packet, the budget will be available online at bothellwa.gov /budget. And it noted that we were looking at perhaps having it available by today. Last report is we will have it live tomorrow morning. And so we wanted to post that both for council, since your packet will be exceptionally large next week because it will have the budget in it as well, but you might want to get through the first few chapters before publication on Thursday, but also for the community. There's also a social media outreach that'll begin tomorrow, as well as more information on the website to draw people to look at it. Also included in your packet and attached to the memo is a schedule of what the projected upcoming meetings are that take us all the way through next week, through the potential adoption the first or second week of December. So we will have a full study session next week focused exactly on the budget. the Finance Director Wong will be with me to go over the technical details. You'll have had a week to review the budget document. And then, as we did 2 years ago, we'll be collecting questions that council might have and some alternatives or options that you would love us to bring back and have information on. And that will help set a schedule for November of which topics are coming back. We will publish all of those in each upcoming packet so you know that we captured your question and when you're going to get an answer. So looking forward to the conversation. It's really, as you'll see in the transmittal letter that's in the first few pages of the budget, this budget is guided by the council priorities, the council vision first and foremost, as well as the community survey. And when we look at the investments that are made, that is the large bulk of what you'll see in terms of what's been proposed. And with that, then, if we need to make adjustments, we certainly will, and we'll bring options. So looking forward to that conversation, and more to come next week.
Thank you, City Manager. Next up is Council Committee Reports, Community Reports, and Conversations. All right, if nobody else has any, I have one. Shelley Helder alerted us to a letter earlier today that got sent over, drafted by the Seattle Mayor's Office concerning a budget request for the asylum seekers. This is part of the ongoing conversation from, I don't know if you guys remember, this summer that I was invited to participate in. You guys got a copy of the letter in your email inbox earlier. It's essentially a request to the governor to include funding for helping the asylum seekers in the state budget.
So you just need us to thumbs up signing on to it, correct?
Yep, correct.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, per the council protocol manual, as a reminder, the mayor is able to sign on to things on behalf of the city council. And so with the timing of this one, we probably could look at the direction that was given before about the mayor's participation in these events. But since it came today and they need an answer by Friday, it made sense to share the letter with council so it would be before you. And really just looking for concurrence to move forward.
Perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's great. I appreciate not wanting to take a prior discussion for granted in the future. I also have a kind of a process question for our city manager and clerk maybe. I know that the mayor can sign on to things if we've kind of covered the topic in our protocol manual or in our somewhere in our policy we're for it. When we have something that's outside of what we have as like our set policy, do we kind of put that in a parking lot when we revisit those documents in the future?
You certainly can. What the policy manual is really tied to state legislative sessions, though, and so like in this case of funding, having state funding for it, this would be something that you absolutely can add. We've had a couple of study sessions, and we'll be bringing back the state agenda and policy manual on November 19th. So that's something that you could add in there. We don't look just to those documents, but we do look to other existing forms of policy in terms of things like the comp plan and different policies that have been adopted by council too. So staff always does the best look we can. And but again, if there's ever any gray area, well, we certainly want to live by the spirit of no surprises. And if it's possible to bring it to council or share, that's what we'll do as well.
Totally appreciate that. And we're never going to have a set of documents that covers every possible situation that the mayor gets contacted about for sure. So I want to acknowledge that.
The mayor has stories, I'm sure.
Yeah. Official thumbs up from me.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. I was glad to see that something came out of that meeting that you had with the other mayors. And so really pleased that this was the request and that there is a clear process to proactively kind of plan and prepare so that we can welcome people who are obviously going through very challenging and difficult times in their lives, that they're even contemplating making a move to our area. So I am in support of signing on to this letter, and I'm glad that you brought it to us. So thank you.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a request for some clarification. In reading the letter, it looks like the letter uses different wording and phrasing throughout to describe potential beneficiaries of the funds. And I just wanted to clarify, some of the language is non-citizen migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, and individuals arriving to the U.S. and Washington who do not qualify for federal refugee resettlement services. And I'm wondering if you can confirm whether any of the beneficiaries will be those who did not follow the prescribed immigration process under U.S. law and are not claiming asylum and refugee status.
I don't have a good answer for that right now. I am not well versed enough in immigration law to attempt to, but I'm sure that's something that staff can follow up on.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you. I think we have to make a decision tonight. Without the additional information, I wouldn't be able to support. My reasoning why is that we have existing members of our community who are homeless, who are food insecure, who struggle with mental health, who also struggle with drug addiction. And I am fully supportive of supporting immigrants who come under the refugee and asylee status and are clearly seeking status for that reason. But knowing that we'd be funding potentially people who are not following U.S. law would be funding something that takes away from existing needs in our community, which are also very important, and there's only limited funds to go around. So I would not be supportive if we're going to be supporting individuals who willingly chose to disregard U.S. law and came here and put themselves in the situation that they're currently in. I would rather see us fund those members of our community that are currently here who have current issues and those who are coming under asylee and refugee status.
We'll reach out to the state agency to find out more about what they included in their budget request to the mayor, to the governor.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks. Seeing that probably a majority of the funding would go towards building out new infrastructure for arriving asylum seekers in Washington, I am in support of this letter.
Deputy Mayor?
Same.
Perfect.
I think we got what we need. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next up is projected agenda discussion. Does anybody have an item they'd like to discuss? Seeing none, I would love to hear a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Curd.
I move to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you for the speedy motion. It is reminiscent of when former Councilmember Dewar was up here. All right, City Clerk.
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alderks?
Yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Thank you, City Clerk. All right, it is, excuse me, it is 6:53. We are going to take a 15-minute break. We will be back at 7:08. All right, welcome back. First up is a public hearing. We have potential action on a resolution regarding Initiative 2117 concerning carbon tax trading. City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor. So just to quickly recap what is before us tonight for the limited public hearing, as Council's aware, in your protocol manual, you do specify process for determining whether or not to consider taking a position on initiative. The Council did do that and set tonight as the date for that.
Recording in progress.
Oh, nobody will ever know my first preamble. The second thing we look to is state law, of course, and within state law is where, as the mayor has been reading in his script every meeting for the last few weeks, there are specific parameters around when there can be discussion in a public forum at a public meeting around initiatives and other election-oriented work. So for tonight, we have ensured that the city has met compliance with all of the requirements, which includes public notice. It includes including the full ballot title in the agenda materials, which you'll have before you, and then also providing an equal opportunity for comment. How that's been divided tonight is that as per council direction, we invited a speaker representing the pro committee and a speaker representing the con committee on both sides of initiative measure number 2117. As council will recall, one of the values that you saw in terms of going through this process was providing some localized education for the community to consider on the ballot measure. So the presentations will satisfy that. Then also there needs to be an equal amount of comments we're allowing for equal public comment. And so tonight, the time budgeted for that has been 15 minutes per side. Following the presentations from the pros and con committee and then the time allocated to hearing from the community, council will then have the decision to make of whether or not you have two resolutions, I should say, in your packet tonight. One supporting the position of support and one to oppose the initiative. Council may also make the decision to take neither action. So those are your choices tonight. Once we reach that point, Robert's rules apply. So we will be looking for, following again the comment periods, we'll be looking for a motion for either support or opposition. If it is seconded, then that opens up for comment from each council member. You get one kick at the can, and then a vote. So mayor will walk the council through that part of the process, and that'll be the same as any other vote that you take. So with that, I think everything is set, and I'm going to turn things over to the city clerk to be able to call upon the presenters tonight. And again, as noted in the agenda bill when we were first doing this, what we asked the clerk to do was to randomly select who went first. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our city clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Stannard. First, we have Davina Dorr, who's going to speak to the no on 2117, and we'll set the timer for 5 minutes.
Oh, okay, there we go. Well, hello, council. For the record, my name is Davina Dorr. I want to thank you for considering this resolution and allowing me to speak on behalf of the No campaign. The first point I'd like to make is the harms that would come about if this initiative passed. It would mean more toxic pollution in the air we breathe, resulting in more adults and kids suffering from asthma and illness, and it would gut programs that protect communities from wildfires. Some of the funds from the Climate Commitment Act have funded wildfire prevention, which is the first time we're funding prevention rather than just reaction. And as we've seen, wildfires are only growing in intensity. And then it jeopardizes vital protections for our waterways, including rivers, lakes, and streams, and eliminates programs for salmon recovery and fish habitat. And finally, transportation. It would make traffic worse and commutes even longer because it guts funding for our state's already stretched transportation plan. Our last package was funded by a third by this act. And these drastic cuts would impact every corner of our state. That puts major roads and bridge projects addressing congestion, safety, and freight mobility in danger of severe delays or outright cancellation. It also reduces funding to restore our ferry system, which is in crisis, and would drastically slash transit service. Not to mention electric buses. I don't know anyone who's against electric school buses, but if you are, read up on what diesel particulate does to children. Again, and then I would like to talk about the misleading claims about gas prices. There is nothing in this, in I-2117 that guarantees lower gas prices. In fact, supporters wrote this initiative and didn't talk about gas prices in the text. If supporters of this initiative had wanted to lower gas prices, they could have written it into the initiative. They did not. Another point I'd like to make is that this we have a statewide coalition fighting this initiative of over 500 organizations. Firefighters and wildfire prevention organizations, health and medical organizations, tribal nations, small businesses and leading companies, labor unions, environmental groups, community organizations, and Washingtonians across our state. And finally, I'd just like to talk about the initiative process. A gentleman who's a hedge fund owner moved up here from California, and he paid for the signature gathering for I guess now it's 7 initiatives. They're purposely misleading. They do nothing to guarantee lower costs for families. And this gentleman poured $6 million to bankroll these initiatives. The Seattle Times was quoted as saying, he's like Tim Eyman with a gigantic bank account. In fact, they had to be taken to court because the Yes campaign did not want to have to put in the voter pamphlet statement what the actual consequences of passing these initiatives are. So with that, I'd just like to reiterate this bill this initiative would really hurt Washington families and really lead to cuts on fighting climate change and all the things that Washington has done to try to make our state healthier and a better place for our children's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to call on Darren Little to speak to the yes on 2117, and you'll have 5 minutes as well.
Sorry, this is the first time I've ever been able to go second, so it's new for me. Get to actually react to some stuff, which is kind of nice. I'm Darren Littell. I am here on behalf of Let's Go Washington. Thank you all for having us here tonight. Really appreciate it. Been to a number of these, and usually just have to sign up on the public comments and rush in, and it's a hassle. So thank you all very much for doing it this way. I'm here tonight to give voice to the 1.3 million Washington voters who signed their names to qualify the fall initiatives. 57% of the people who signed are Democrats or independent voters. These are common sense issues, not partisan ones. Initiative 2117 repeals the most regressive tax in state history, the carbon tax, which hurts low-income and middle-income communities the most. Despite Governor Inslee's promise that the Climate Commitment Act would cost families only pennies, independent media, and even the governor's own economists note the Climate Commitment Act has increased gas prices by about 50 cents per gallon. The governor knew it would drive up gas prices. He continued to mislead on that issue. Additionally, the Climate Commitment Act has increased home energy bills by about 40%. This is something you can look up for yourself. Take a look at your home heating bills from 2022 and compare them to today. You'll see about a 40% increase. The difference is staggering. The second biggest issue is the fact the Climate Commitment Act is not working. The architects of the CCA cannot point to a single piece of data showing carbon has been reduced. Let me repeat. Not one single piece of data showing that carbon has been reduced. This is despite the state's promise of a website to track progress against goals for the Climate Commitment Act. So what happened? The state was missing its goals so badly, it unceremoniously decided to shut the website down. There's a lot of rhetoric around commitment to climate policy, but no actual real accountability for climate policy outcomes. As Joseph Fitzgibbon, one of the main architects of the Climate Commitment Act, admitted, the state isn't tracking the results of state spending on CO2 reduction. And even if they did, there is no effort to hold agencies accountable for their failed efforts. The carbon tax is the most regressive tax in state history. It hurts low-income and middle-income families the most and takes a larger percentage of their income. It hurts parents trying to get their kids to drama or football practice. It hurts people trying to get to work. So just buy a Tesla, right? Except $40,000 car is out of reach for most people in Washington state. More money is spent on government. So how is this money being taken off the backs of our residents spent? More money is spent on government planning and new government staff than on salmon recovery. More money is spent on permitting and writing strategy plans than on reducing the risk of catastrophic wildfire. While low-income workers face higher gas and food costs, many of the subsidies for electric vehicle charging, rooftop solar panels, and bike lanes go straight to the wealthy. Too much of the money is being given to political special interests rather than being spent on actual carbon-reducing projects. There have been false claims that passing Initiative 2117 would cut road and bridge funding. Let me be clear. None of the money from the Climate Commitment Act can be used for roads and bridges. Not one single penny can be used for roads and bridges. They are playing word games and hoping nobody will notice. Finally, the free bus program that opponents have mentioned here tonight were already in existence before the carbon tax was passed, and they would continue long after. As far as reducing gas prices, an article actually came out today where British Petroleum, one of the organizations of funding the opposition, they demonstrated that eliminating the CCA will cut gas prices. That came out just today. The state has had a $19 billion surplus over the last 5 years. $19 billion. And they've chosen not to spend that money on these projects. They have instead created a new regressive carbon tax to pay for a program that isn't doing what the state promised it would do. Governor Gary Locke was asked about Initiative 2117 earlier this month. He said, when the governor and leaders in Olympia said, trust us, we're going to pass this. This isn't going to hurt you. This is going to help you. And then the opposite occurs. Voters start to lose trust with the government. And that's what's happened here. I have asthma. My 3-year-old son has asthma. We need to do something. But we need to do something that works. The Climate Commitment Act is a broken program that might make people feel good so they can go about their day, but it does not actually reduce carbon emissions. I'm asking you to stand with me and the millions of Washingtonians who are tired of paying more for less, who've seen the failures of the CCA and are asking for better from our government. I'm sincerely asking you to vote yes, pay less on Initiative 2117 this November. We have to fix what's broken for our generation and for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to call on those that signed up to speak on yes to I-2117. Each side, when I call on you, each side will get a total of 15 minutes, so we're going to set the timer for 15 minutes. For yes, I have one person signed up, and that is Mr. Mark Swanson. If you'd like to step to the podium.
My name is Mark Swanson. I've lived in Bothell since 1991. I ran for city council to try to save the salmon. Wasn't able to do it. They're getting destroyed. Talk about CO2. Until an inner city bus hits 30% capacity, both going with traffic and coming against traffic, because, you know, they run loops. Until they hit 30% capacity for both ways as an average, an inner city bus per passenger mile puts more CO2 into the atmosphere than a single occupancy family car. Where's the science? There is none.
Mr. Swanson, this time is for talking about the Initiative 2117. Are you going to roll that in?
I'm talking about it because it's apropos. I'm talking about greenhouse gas emissions. And they don't even talk about the 12 metric tons that a bus driver uses up every year because he's an individual. All he does is drive the bus. 12 metric tons. So you got to work up against that. Just start. Now, about 2117. I was in partnership and created the very first wind turbine power plant project in the state of Washington. You could look it up. Mariah Energy Group, LLC. Out in Goldendale, me and my partner, we paid for the bird study that all the big ones, they leveraged off of our money, cost us a lot. So I'm not insensitive. In fact, I love the environment. But it's a simple fact that transit is a damage to the CO2. It's damaging to the salmon, but that's tire wear particles. You've already heard me talk about that enough. The best thing we could do is encourage hybrids. Self-driving hybrids are going to be our future. It's only 7 or 8 years away. We're not going to need these intercity buses. Regarding 2117, I've got a degree in mechanical engineering. I've got a degree in agricultural engineering, and I've got a horrors list of upper-level mathematics that I've taken, not the least of which is multivariable nonlinear differential equations. I think I'm probably the only person I know since the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change Report number 6 came out. I've spent hundreds of hours reading the actual science, not the policy statements. Hundreds of hours reviewing the actual science. So I'm just flabbergasted that this city is wants to take, or is even considering taking a political initiative, a political stance against an initiative that can't be more divisive. Nobody in geology, architecture, Shelley Kloba, kinesiology, Derek Stanford, he's got a degree in a PhD in accounting. None of these people have any climate. My agricultural engineering degree, I wrote several programs dealing with solar radiation, soil temperatures, groundwater flows, the impact of ground cover. This is divisive. And I want to hasten to remind you that in the protocol manual, you have an oath of office. You have to remain impartial. You can't divide the city. I know how I'm going to vote on it. But you guys got no business speaking for me or taking a position. You're sworn to impartiality. I don't care how much you want to try to impress your political elites by how on board you are with what is effectually anti-science nonsense. Since 1980, they've been taking the high median temperatures at SeaTac Airport. The trend of that data, we are 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit cooler now, 40 years later, despite the fact the CO2 went from 340 parts per million to 420. This is anti-science. I'd even go so far to say it's evil. The only thing that this is going to do for anybody, you'll be able to prove to your political elites that you're so beholden to just how on board you are. But that's the only effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I am going to call on those that signed up for no, to speak to no on 2117. Before I do that, we did receive one written comment, and that is from Kathy Fabracci, who wrote into the council, and that will be her comments on this issue will be made part of the record. So with that, I'm going to call on Whitney Negenbauer, and this side will get a total. I have 2 people signed up to speak to no on 2117 for a total of 15 minutes. So go ahead, Whitney.
Good evening, Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on Initiative 2117 this evening. My name is Whitney Negebauer, and I'm a resident of Bothell, and I'd like to share some of the benefits of the Climate Commitment Act and the funding that it has provided to the Bothell community through the lens of the nonprofit that I direct. Whale Scout has been a parks partner since 2019. In recent years, tree planting and community education programs have flourished at the former Wayne Golf Course, thanks to partnerships with the city and grant funding. One significant grant Whale Scout received, the Urban and Community Forestry Program, is supported by Climate Commitment Act dollars. We're 1/3 of the way through this project right now, and we've already hosted 10 community education programs focused on low-impact walks, educational science programs in English and Spanish, and paint in the park events exploring artistic connections with nature. Not only is the funding important for climate, tree canopy, education, salmon recovery, and a multitude of other environmental benefits, the funding directly impacts jobs in our city. This grant supports 2 local students, one from North Creek High School and one recently graduated from the University of Washington. They will play a critical role in getting 500 additional plants in the ground with the help of community volunteers and removing invasive and non-native blackberries from climbing and taking over the mature trees at the park. We've already been seeing impacts of this initiative just being with this initiative on the ballot. We're already seeing threats to our staff and their employment. Rachel Coots, who you may have met, as the majority of her position paid for with Climate Commitment Act funding. She couldn't be here tonight, but in her own words, I have been working with Whale Scout for nearly 2 years now, starting out as an intern and now getting to work as a full-time employee, as a student mentor and community education coordinator. Within a given year, I work with thousands of volunteers restoring habitat and protecting our local watershed. I also lead dozens of community education events to highlight the need to protect our endangered marine species. And lastly, I have mentored and led students in interns and research projects and provided equitable career opportunities for them to strengthen their aspirations. All of this work has been made possible by the Climate Commitment Act. Currently, due to the uncertainty of 2117, and the initiative being on the ballot, grants that fund my work have been put on pause so that my impact in the community and the health of our environment is also potentially put on pause. I ask that council take a position against 2117 so I can keep fighting for a healthier future. Whale Scout is also just one of many other nonprofit groups in the city and in the region supported by Climate Commitment Act dollars. This funding is too important for our community and our natural resources to just be repealed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Dakota Rash. Dakota, can you hear us? Are you ready?
I can, and I hope so. Thank you. My name is Dakota Rash, and I just want to urge you all to oppose Initiative 2117. Cap and trade ultimately is not really enough compared to what we need to be doing to fight the incoming crises that we are facing, but we need to keep the legislative progress we've made thus far. So more and more, I think we are seeing the stark reality of climate change across our globe. Phoenix just had a stretch of 113 consecutive days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The relative drought we are seeing in this state, I see it every day in that our western red cedars are rapidly dying off. We may even lose them in the lowlands in my lifetime. Within as many weeks, we have witnessed 2 storms of unprecedented calamitous potential over Florida, the fastest intensification we have ever observed across the Atlantic Ocean, which not a single weather model accurately predicted. Our oceans and inlands are boiling, and the concentration of greenhouse gas pollutants in our atmosphere are the highest they've ever been. We make promises to address this problem, but we are still on course to an unlivable future by the end of this century. Despite all of this, I think we have what it takes to turn around and heal from this problem. And a major part of that act of saving ourselves is forcing decarbonization as fast as possible. It has to be forced through law because I think left to their own devices, the forces that be that want these sorts of activities, burning and digging up fossil fuels, and then passing the costs on to us through high gas prices, won't stop. You don't have to take my word for it. Take the words of Occidental Petroleum CEO Vicky Holub, who last month said in an interview with the New York Times, the world should continue producing and burning oil and gas until every last molecule has been extracted from the ground. Or take PSE's own internal financial statements where they openly acknowledge that if they weren't mandated by law to reduce the carbon that they in their energy profile, they wouldn't be. They'd be an oil and gas project through and through. So even despite the fact that the renewable energy is so much more affordable, In fact, because of that, you can't monopolize wind and sun as well as you can oil and gas. The corporations who produce it and burn it won't stop unless we make them. And that is why we need to have things like the CCA on the books. We need to, in fact, I think, be making it stronger and making stronger progress towards clean energy. But unfortunately, right now, we're in a defensive position. So I would urge you all to continue to defend things like clean air, clean water. I mean, having coffee available for the future, I think that's a big one for me. But, you know, even beyond that, here's just a few more things that 2117 would gut. Efforts to repair aging bridges and create more crosswalks near schools and playgrounds, which, yes, much more than a single cent is planned to go there. You can see that on how the Climate Commitment Act invests in pollution-free Washington. And my microphone just switched. Hopefully you all can still hear me. The first CCA auction was held in February 2023. It generated $3.2 million, and that money is indeed being sent to exact projects I mentioned, like, you know, expanding crosswalks in vital areas. It would gut improvements for managing stormwater runoff, which is essential to salmon health because salmon need the 3 C's: cool, clear, clean, consistent, and complex habitats, and stormwater really hurts that. It would gut access to federal funds such that we could potentially direct $1 billion to developing high-speed rail, which would do massive amounts of good for the people trying to get across this state. And it would gut plans to allow local governments like Bothell to expand air monitoring programs to help keep people safe through heat and smoke. It would do so much more, but in all honesty, I could take up more, like probably 2 hours talking about all of them, and I know I just have 15 minutes, so less than that. I really appreciate the chance to speak on this, and I hope you all protect the people of Bothell and Washington and the nation and future generations by keeping the progress we've made and then hopefully even advocating for more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all I have signed up for this evening.
So Mayor, at this time, we would be looking to you to call for a motion for either the resolution supporting or opposing, or again, council may make the decision of not taking a position.
Does council have the opportunity to discuss this among ourselves and speak to the community, or is that not included in the RCW?
When you make the motion and second, once there's a motion and second on the table, then council may speak to what they intend to vote to that motion.
Okay. I would love to entertain a motion. Oh. Councilmember Mankey, are you looking to make a motion?
Yes, I am.
All right, go ahead.
I move that we take no action tonight.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Mankey and a second from Councilmember Zorns to take no action tonight. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm moving that we take no action tonight because I do not believe that we should be taking a position on this initiative. The community has not asked us to weigh in on it. Taking a position would be like providing unsolicited advice, like a relative weighing in at Thanksgiving dinner on the details of your life. I also believe that this measure is being brought forward by the people of this state, and it received overwhelming support in the number of signatures to make it to the ballot, indicating that there's a sizable population of voters that feel that the pros of the legislation don't outweigh the cons. While perhaps well-intentioned, I think that the current legislation is hurting everyday Washingtonians as they're already struggling with high inflation costs. And this legislation is an additional punch to their pocketbook. And it doesn't actually stop pollution. It makes polluters over a certain threshold pay an additional tax to pollute over the prescribed limit. I think the commentary as well around cutting and gutting budgets is misleading. I think that this legislation, was set up recently, and so the state government set up their funding around it. So the fact that things would be gutted, I don't think that's a true statement. I think they would have to reprioritize their spending to be within the bounds of the current taxes. I also believe that the voters of Bothell are intelligent enough to read, understand, and vote on the policy before them, which was brought forth by their peers for consideration. And most importantly, I think that we are not unbiased third parties. It should be noted that the city stands to gain financially to the tune of several $1,000,000 if the initiative fails. So we should really maintain and be an unbiased party in this and let the voters vote the way that they see fit. I think we should not take any action tonight. I think we should let the voters vote the way that they want to and remain silent.
All right, City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
No.
Councilmember Alderks?
No.
Councilmember Kurd?
No.
Councilmember Mankey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
No.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
No.
The motion fails 5-2 with council members Zorns and Mankey voting in the affirmative.
Thank you, Clerk. Councilmember Dodd?
Thanks. I move that we pass a resolution encouraging a no vote on Initiative 2117.
I'll second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Councilmember Kurd. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Councilmember Dodd?
Thank you. I have really appreciated everyone who came to talk tonight. We don't often, as a council, pass resolutions about legislation, and I think that it's something that we're also working through in this case with with an initiative whose text does not match a lot of the marketing claims that I run into out in the wild, and with a number of constituents who have reached out and asked us to address this, including a few tonight. I am very comfortable going ahead and passing a resolution as we've talked about in the past. I really appreciate the dialogue we've had as a council, and I look forward to how we evolve on how we tackle these things in the future.
Councilmember Kurd?
Thanks. I will bring up that the reason why I asked for this public hearing to begin with was because a number of high schoolers at North Creek High School had reached out to me asking what the city's process was in order to take a stance on what they saw to be, a policy that they were following in their government class, in their civics class, in their science class, and asking for a voice. And so while the public hearing tonight wasn't the whole city showing up, I am grateful that we as a council value our community and our constituents enough to give them a voice. And, if the city is going to collaborate with organizations that are providing public benefit or are, benefiting directly from funding for transit programs and salmon recovery, I think that the people of Bothell really deserve to know where some of that money is coming from and just what's at risk. So I'm grateful for the time that we had to talk about it and the time that we granted people to come in and speak.
Councilmember Zorns?
May I speak to how I'm going to vote on this, or do you want me to wait?
No, you can do, this is the time for that.
Perfect. I have enough of a science background in my undergrad and grad work and then real life to be able to see pros to both arguments. I also see incomplete science going on here. And who is paying the cost for this is our middle and lower class I'm speaking economically here, population. And this higher gas tax, which is a reality, has a catastrophic ripple effect in our groceries, our cost of living. And it needs to end somewhere. We need to start turning it and reassessing how we're addressing the problems that we see, and taxing the people who this benefits the least, and creating a wider and wider economic disparity is wrong. And so I have an opinion about it, but I am firmly convinced that this needs to be in the hands of the voters. And for those that this is a hardship for, they need to either embrace this or reject it without any influence with me. So I can look at them eye to eye and say, you made the decision on your future, and I didn't step in and muddy the water. So I have to vote no on this. And I hope that people for this and against this vote. I don't want to see people on either side of this say, I didn't feel like voting this time. You need to vote this time. So I'm going to vote no on this, and just want to encourage people for or against this to get out and vote. So thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And I echo the thanks to everybody who provided their input on this topic. What especially resonated with me is Whitney's, who's no longer here, looks like, talking about real effects, because all I've been hearing was hypothetical affects this and affects that, but I saw how it affects our local Bothell, the Bothell community, especially the park that we all love and enjoy, which is the former Rain Golf Course, which, by the way, we need to have a name for soon. And employment opportunities for the younger folks and all that. I see the impact here, at least in the local community. I'm not going to speak for people outside, and I would vote for this motion. So.
All right, I have a couple things to say, but ultimately, to me, the question is, do I want my kids growing up in a world with more pollution or less pollution? Do I want to live in a world with more pollution or less pollution? I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious. Left to their own devices, we know polluters will act in their own best interest because that's their job. That's their duty to their shareholders. But it's not necessarily what's in our collective best interest. And it's our job to represent our collective best interests, just like it is polluters' job to represent their own best interests. And quite frankly, I think a world with less pollution in the future is a lot better. Councilmember Mankey made a really good point. The city of Bothell is not an uninterested third party because we have a lot to lose. And I think it's important for us to let our community know that in this forum, because it's our job as representatives of our city to protect our residents when we have something to lose, which we do in this case. We know that, we hear all the time in our capital facilities plan how much it's going to cost to transfer to an environmentally sustainable economy, transportation system, utilities, all of that. And when we're in this moment where we have a chance to make a choice that can give us less pollution and more money to fund the changes we know that we need to make so that that doesn't fall on the back of our future residents someday when this opportunity is gone, I think that's really important. I would much rather the biggest polluters pay for some of those upgrades than Bothell residents. And I'm here to do the right thing for my community. Lastly, I really appreciated hearing from Whitney and Whale Scout about just some real concrete impacts that the CCA has already been having in Bothell on salmon habitat restoration. And just like with pollution, the question is, do we want more or less? And I would love to see more salmon habitat restoration in Bothell, not less. So I will be voting yes on the motion to say please vote no on 2117. I had to think about that for a second. City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
No.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mankey?
No.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 5-2 with council members Zorns and Mankey in the negative.
Thank you, City Clerk. All right. It took me a minute to read down to the next place. Next up, under Ordinances and Resolutions, we have consideration of an extension period for negotiations of a purchase and sale agreement with Bothell United Methodist Church for the sale of Lot P South. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. And as covered last week in my update to council about the status and answering some of the frequently asked questions that we've been hearing, I had mentioned that we are still awaiting to come to conclusion on negotiations of a purchase and sale agreement. As council will recall, back on July 16th, you authorized the signature on the city side of a letter of intent, which specified a 90-day period for negotiations of that purchase and sale agreement. It was then signed and processed and sent over to the Bothell United Methodist Church, where their representatives signed it. And we're coming up on the expiration of that 90 days next week. What you have before you tonight is a resolution to consider, which would extend that period of time and keep the terms of the letter of intent whole for an additional 50 days. What's intended in that time then is to continue negotiations. And as I mentioned last week, the primary benefit of an extension, because of, again, as we could negotiate a purchase and sale agreement without an active letter of intent, that is certainly an option. Preserving the terms and extending that deadline, what that does is it keeps us at a baseline of where we know what to expect in terms of what are the principles that have already been agreed to, and what would you expect as I bring back a recommendation on a purchase and sale agreement, what would you expect to see in there? Those are the things that we previously negotiated. You would expect to see something consistent. So keeping that going, I think, has a benefit there. In terms of the timeline specifically, this timeline would bring us into the end of the first week of December. As I know you're well aware, because you're looking at your nights and your projected agendas as well, the month of November is quite busy. And so it's possible we could potentially bring an agreement in November, but we wanted to preserve the opportunity of also considering at your first meeting in December for that agreement. To just make sure that we're load balancing across all of the different things that you statutorily need to accomplish, which includes adoption of a biennial budget as well as coming to closure on the comprehensive plan. So with that, what we've agreed to do is we're prioritizing bringing agreement back on December 3rd, if at all possible. We've agreed in principle of that in order to do that, by the end of the second week of November, we would need to, both sides would have to be able to come to an agreement of, we think we've got something for the council to consider. That way we have ample time for review, analysis, and preparation of materials for the council to make an informed decision in December. With that, again, I'll just note that we are recommending the adoption of the resolution per the justification that I provided earlier of, I think, keeping the same terms clear will be a benefit. Again, I'm also not expecting that if the letter of intent expired that all of a sudden we'd see something radically different. But I think just for those who are watching this project closely and with interest, it helps to know what's the anticipated next step. With that, I'll turn things over to council for questions, or if you're ready to entertain a motion, we'll let you consider that as well.
Councilmember Kurd.
Thank you, and thanks, City Manager. I wanted to acknowledge that you had forwarded council information about Arch Fund kind of timelines for the end of the year, which is really helpful information, and I think it plays nicely into this reasoning behind why an extension is necessary, and the 50-day timeline makes a lot of sense. So with that, I will move to adopt the amending resolution.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Curd and a second from Councilmember Dodd to approve the recommended action. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? I would like to speak to the motion, as it happens. Actually, Councilmember Zorns.
Yeah, I'll just keep this short. I just want to again affirm the appreciation that I have for the dedication and passion that this project has been given. I also appreciate the excellence and thoroughness the staff has put on this. But for reasons that probably most of you on the dais don't want to bring into the conversation, extensions are a poor precedence. I think that this is an opportunity for us to bring community back in and own this project and have a conversation that more people are involved in. I know that that is not welcome by most ears on the dais, but I'm going to vote no, not because I hate the project, but I think that it needs to go through a process that's more vetted with public activity and interest.
Councilmember Mankey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also going to be a no vote tonight. Knowing that the city spent over 10 months negotiating an LOI, which is intended to establish agreement on major points, and then not having this first milestone be met in the agreed upon timeline is a bad precedent to set. It doesn't instill confidence in the ability for us to move this forward quickly along the timelines that were agreed to. And I have great concern about that. It's kind of like going on a first date with someone and, you don't present your best self on your first date. You don't follow through with the commitment to call back, after the date. And that's, what's happening here. We did not meet the deadline for the purchase and sale on the agreed upon timeline. So I'm going to be a no tonight, not because I don't like the project and I don't think we need affordable housing, but it raises questions for me on why we're not able to meet deadlines on time.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be voting yes for the extension, and I want to explain why. It was clear to me initially that the original time frame was let's go for it and see what happens. We talked about extensions early on. I don't feel that this is an adverse outcome. It's just a matter of the fact that a lot of people in this process are doing something for the first time, and it's something that could benefit our community, and we have a small part in that. I also want to remind all 7 of us, including myself, that what we say from this dais matters. This is the third time in discussing this issue overall that some of us have chosen to use insinuations and imply that secret meetings have happened, cite offers on the property that were never actually made to staff, and other facts that are made up. And they've been picked up in our community and amplified by people speaking irresponsibly. We need to ensure that what we say is factual, and that if we have a claim about someone else's conduct, that we have proof or evidence that it happened. It's really alarming to see the way that some people on this council have really let the level of discourse fall, and I would task all of us with bringing it back up, speaking in facts and clearly, and not making insinuations and spreading harmful messages in the community. Thank you.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be voting in support of this extension for the reason that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to partner with a established, respected community partner. And I think that working with them is the way to demonstrate that we are good partners and to honor our commitments and recognize that as we discussed the possibility of if extensions were needed, we could go to council and request extensions. And so I feel like the church has been a good partner to us, and that we owe it to them to follow through on our word and be a good partner to them. So thank you.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks. It's so easy to say yes, but, and then come up with something that is small and makes it seem like we were against it from the start when really we weren't. And so I'm really encouraging everyone on council to make sure that their voice is known from the start and the story's not changing, right? This isn't a dating relationship, it's a parent and child relationship. A parent would do everything possible to make sure that their child is successful. And if that means waiting a little bit, having a gap year, so that they're well set on their journey for success, that's what should be done. And so this small extension to allow the opportunity for funding from Arch to maybe be in play and help this project be successful makes a whole lot of sense. So I'm going to be voting yes.
Good. I remain really excited about this project and am in full support of the extension. I'd also like to express my appreciation for the folks at BUMC, being the community partner that you are, who have been dealing with really unfair, in many cases, just untrue rhetoric that have come from certain parts of the community and certain parts of this dais. And we had Dr. Esterberg here today talking about how she's trying to teach kids how to return to productive, earnest civil discourse. And I really hope that on this dais, we can model what that looks like rather than occasionally be a cautionary tale. So my full support for this project. We have an opportunity to help thousands of families that can't afford to live here, that would really like to, that are in our community, that are contributing, that are working here, that are working in some cases for the city or in service jobs, or a teacher at a school district that wants to live in the community that they're a part of. And we have a chance through this partnership to make that happen. And that's something that I remain incredibly excited about. Yeah, I'm an absolute yes on this. Let's do the extension and let's get a cool project done. City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
No.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Menke?
No.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 5-2 with Councilmembers Zorns and Menke in the negative.
Thank you, City Clerk. I'm going to take a quick break. Is 5 minutes to go to the bathroom enough, or is somebody going to side-eye me if I say 5 minutes? We'll do 10. All right. Rami said do 10. It's 8:02 p.m. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll be back down at that table for a study session at 8:12. Welcome back. We're in a different place. We're like Superman. You turn the camera off and then you turn it back on and all of a sudden we're in a different place. That was deserving of a snort. We have a study session for our 2024 Comprehensive Plan reviews, draft review of elements and proposed development regulation amendments. And I'm going to stop talking now.
Thank you, Mayor. And as referenced last week and also earlier tonight, we are definitely in the throes of coming to a conclusion on comprehensive plan. So if you're feeling like we had a conversation last week about the comprehensive plan, you are correct. We will have one again next week as well. So we're thankful for our staff from community development and our partners from Burke who are doing so much to keep this moving forward as best we are able. With that, am I turning it directly over? I'm going to take it to our Community Development Deputy Director, Kristin Getz. Take it away, Kristin.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. It's great to be here again. It's getting very, very real as we trudge forward to December. Tonight, I'm joined by Jesse with Burke Consulting and Director Greetspan here to answer any questions. We also have a couple of folks from Burke on the line if questions need their assistance as well. Action tonight, looking for feedback on this, specifically on the remaining revised elements within the comprehensive plan, and then the initial draft zoning regulation proposals. I'd like to break it into those two pieces, if I can, looking for any feedback, any issues on the draft comp plan elements. I'll run through a few of them, provide that opportunity, and then move into the development regulations, because those do really get into the weeds. I want to make sure we have time for that. A quick refresh, the same slide you've been seeing as we get closer and closer to the end of phase 4. So tonight, just working on those final development regulations, and then we'll wrap up in December. And tonight, the remaining 11 elements: human services, economic development, urban design, culture and historic resources, parks and recreation, natural environment, shoreline, climate, capital facilities, utilities, and the implementation chapters. A lot there, but much of which was updated was relatively minor textually. The majority of the revisions to the comprehensive plan were focused on the updates from the preferred alternative, which was very heavy in the land use and housing elements, very sparse throughout these remaining elements. And there were just a few policy updates, a few adds, and all of the adds were from based on comments that we received from organizations like NUSA, PSRC, Fish and Wildlife, some members of the community, and wanted to just touch on a couple of those, if you'd like, and then make sure there aren't any issues before we move on to the development regulations. So a few of them, primarily within economic development, parks and rec, natural environment, and climate, where we received comments from PSRC on both climate and economic development, and looking to expand upon information about, let's see, this was business displacement and preventing that. Also within natural environment and climate, looking to eliminate or focus development outside of floodways. That was a pretty big topic, making sure that was very clear. So we added that language in there. And then with human services, in the human services element, NUSA really did focus on identifying enhancements for older adults supporting aging in place. So we beefed up that section and added a new policy. I just wanted to kind of stop at that point, see if there was anything that council had issues with, so we can get that feedback, get that built into the final draft that we'll bring back later on in November and December.
I don't have any. I just want to say thank you for the hard work. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of content, which requires a lot of hours of review. Even like you guys spent tens of hours, I spent only hours. Just relatively speaking. So thank you for the work on this. I think the remaining elements look good. I have questions about the next part, so this one is good. Thank you.
Okay. For the municipal code updates, I'm going to walk through a few of the dimensional standard changes, starting with lot size and density. Focus a little bit heavier on that. Get into the adjustments to height, site coverage, so that's your impervious surface or lot coverage or building coverage, and then get into overlays, and then into some of the development regulations. The primary dimensional standard changes, those are all found on pages 409 through 412 of the packet, the very, very end of the lengthy packet. I apologize. And then we'll touch on those other development regulations and a few just sort of miscellaneous ones. The zoning designation changes, we banded these, they're color coordinated on the left. That matches the future land use map, hopefully pulling you back into that imagery. Finding the assignments for the new low density zones, we we sort of cleaned up residential conservation just to get rid of a square footage. So the R40,000, for example, is now the RC. The low-density residential 1 and 2s, that is going to be made up of 9600s or 8400s. The 7200s within that RL2, those are all within the MUGA. So those are areas, everything that is 7200 within the current city limits, that is down within the RM2 designation that was bumped up to the medium density residential. Then we group them into the medium density residential and then onto manufactured home park, going from an overlay to a code. And I'll get into that overlay to code, or what we're looking to do as we move forward. So this is just sort of the context of sort of how we're taking that larger zoning map with the individual residential zones and consolidating them into these much more dense areas for some.
Is it okay if I ask a question? Because I have questions about every single slide. Do you want us to wait, or no?
Go for it.
There's some, one of the things we tried to do with this comp plan is separate land use from zoning, and was really helpful. Land use now, it's easier to look at. I'm a property owner. I know nothing about development. I look at this, okay, can I build or can I not build? But now it's getting more complicated. Is there a way to make it even more simplified? Or do we have to have those various breakdowns at each one of those levels?
Without creating one singular residential zone, no. They're generally based on lot sizes, and this sort of moves them towards something a little bit more consolidated. The land use designation, the underlying comprehensive plan map is layer 1. Layer 2 is the zoning layer, and then a third layer to make it really fun is sub-areas or overlays, just the special things that happen. I guess you could add critical area layers on top of that too, but this does consolidate quite a bit. The zoning map, once it's finished and it incorporates these changes, will reduce a lot of that redundancy. A phase 2 that we're wanting to do is to go through somewhat of that, I call it the alphabet soup, on the zoning map, which has a lot of zones, consolidating that and clarifying, not changing what's allowed, just cleaning it up and identifying how that can happen. That's a next year project. Don't have the time, would need another 6 to 8 months to wrap that up. So this was as reduced and clear as we could get.
I appreciate that. Does that require a comp plan update then next year, or the next extra work, or?
It wouldn't need a comp plan update,
Okay,
as
so-
we've covered that with this comp plan work. So it would be just a zoning amendment. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I don't know if I understood that. So there's a requirement that we have at least 4 residential medium zones?
No.
Okay. The way you just explained it said that like we reduced it as much as we could. So like what is the factor that is the could? Like what would be keeping us from simplifying further?
Do you want to take that?
The button, right? We're trying to create some kind of variations in density within the residential medium. So you could, in theory, have a 1-to-1, like each land use designation has one zone associated with it. We're trying to create some kind of scaling in density and use. And so this gives you a little bit more nuance when you get to the zoning. So not all residential medium areas are at the same density. And we'll get into the kind of like the minimum densities and maximums. And so those vary within there.
So just because there are different zones doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be different code and different
They have
regulations?
different, they have different like dimensional standards associated with them. The uses are similar within, I'd have to look at it and make sure it's, I can't say for sure if it's all residential medium has the same uses exactly. But the dimensional standards are where they're going to vary.
Okay. I had some of the same thoughts as the deputy mayor. Like if we selected the residential medium designations based on certain criteria, and it seems like we're taking the criteria of what is the current minimum lot size and we're zoning based on that. And like, I like the criteria that we used earlier, like, proximity to transit services, things like that. So like, I just want to make sure that, we're doing the good things where the good things should be, and we're not doing fewer good things because of the current minimum lot size.
You can jump in if you want, but that is the intent by creating some gradation in the residential medium. You can encourage the additional density in the areas that are closest to those amenities.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question about this? Is there, do they have to be, are these max values, or are they like 7,200 and 7,400, 7,200, or RL1, RL2, for example?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be, you can do this and you can do that. Is that like is that like only this or only that, or is it, can you set a maximum value and then the developer or the builder can build?
Yeah, we'll get into the
Okay.
density. That's our next slide.
Let me say one more thing. The numbers in that middle column are what your those are your current, the square footage. Yeah, and we're trying to move away from that to simplify it.
So the initial draft zoning changes moves away from that square footage. So we're getting away from 7,200, 8,400 minimum lot size and just looking at a units per acre. So what we have here is the proposed either minimum density. So some of those higher density zones have a minimum density of 25, 30, or 40 units per acre. The maximum density for those new zones, so the residential conservation, RL1, 7, 8, and growing there. In order to hit our countywide policy, our targets, so the targets that we had talked about with the future land use map, those we would have to, that's what the max base density would achieve based on the assumptions of how redevelopment would take place. Time, age of structure, existing structures, sort of what that calculation came up with. And that's where these come from to grow that density within these RM zones. They're all increasing, as you can see from the column on the right. And creating that opportunity. And the slides following this will get into, well, how do you do that if the height doesn't change? How do you do that if the setbacks don't change? So this is what the initial draft has. The next slide I do want to chat about real quick. It identifies a potential option that we discussed with Planning Commission last Thursday, which would maintain a proposed minimum density which follows what the current maximum density is. So that column on the right, we looked at this due to a concern about sort of how could we say your minimum density is 25 units per acre in an RM2 site, but I don't want to build 25 units per acre. I would like to build 8 or 10 or 15 units per acre. Whichever way we would go, the 5-year report out is the critical piece. So in 5 years, through the implementation, through tracking, we'll know if we're moving in the right direction, and Commerce will be looking for that data to show we are moving towards that, the housing target goals of various affordability bands, whichever way we go. But remembering that if we don't build to the proposed maximum base density, and follow that modeling. Who knows what happens? Maybe it just is blown out of the water. I don't know. It's going to take time to tell. Even sort of going through that development process can take 2 years, 2.5 years from the go date of this new code before we would start to be able to identify the trend that we're heading in. Planning Commission was supportive of following what's option 1 in this column, so using the minimum base density of 25, 30, and 40 units per acre.
I have a question, and this is, Director Greenspan, something I briefly brought up with you earlier. When you brought us the residential medium in the comp plan, like the bigger one, I believe it was an average of a 2,000 square foot minimum lot size and 8 units per lot. And if you game out the units per acre in that, it looks a lot different than this. So like, am I calculating that wrong? And is that still what we're shooting for as an average for the residential medium zones?
Yeah, what we came to you with before were some estimated gross densities of what we thought would be in the residential medium. We knew we were going to have to get a little more nuanced to kind of come to this. The reality is that your RM4 represents a relatively small amount of the city, and it's generally very close to your existing centers. It's kind of like right around downtown or right around Canyon Park. So there's essentially more kind of the RM1 and 2 than there is of the 3 and 4 in those residential mediums. So the estimated grosses are still kind of.
I don't know if I was clear. I was thinking they were going to be higher.
You were
not
thinking
lower.
these would be higher?
Yes.
So the maximums here, I believe, are higher than the gross densities we showed for the RM.
So if you look at 8 units per lot and a 2,000 square foot minimum lot size, and it's like 45,000 or so, like well, here, let's do it real quick. So 8 times 8 would be 80. Yeah, look at that, right about there. In the top level. But if the top level isn't very much of it, then it seems like that density is going to be less than we had originally talked about.
I think I need to follow the math visually. Sorry.
It's like 45,000 square feet to an acre, isn't it? 43.5. We'll call it 44 for fun. 44 divided by 2 is 22, and 22 times 8 is 176 units per acre if it's 2,000 square foot minimum lot size and 8 units per lot. So like, am I remembering that wrong? Am I mathing wrong? Is this
No.
expressing something different? Like, what's the?
We did look it up to, I think the preferred alternative uses 6 units per lot in the medium. And it ranged from 2,000 to 4,000. So yeah, at the higher end, it would be about 2,000. I believe I'm trying to run through this in my head.
Was that under the neighborhoods alternative instead of the hybrid?
The 8 units was I think the neighborhoods, you're right. The 6 was the hybrid, so the preferred. Let me think about this a little bit more. I don't have a clear answer for you just yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I liked that, and I liked having more residential medium spread throughout at that, potential higher density that we could see more of the kind of housing types that our community's been asking for. And this looks a lot different than what I was expecting.
So you were expecting to see something more?
I was expecting a residential medium to average in the 8 units per lot, 2,000 square foot minimum lot size area.
Okay. Let me note that.
Question, Kristin. This is a very good question that the mayor brought up, which I wanted to ask a clarification. The max densities are based on what we talked about. When was it, last week? Oh no, a couple weeks. Whenever we talked about the flum, and we had targets we need to hit, and those numbers here are based on the numbers usually like 12,000, whatever the number is.
Correct.
Right. So. I think that was the missing thing in for me. I didn't get to it, but if those are the targets, then what you are suggesting, Mayor, is maybe we need to go over the targets that we agreed to before.
I was under the assumption that what we had talked about in the comp plan, I say the comp plan like it was one meeting. I was under the impression that the residential medium was going to be averaging an average of 8 units per lot and 2,000 square foot medium lot size. I'm pretty sure that's what we were told in study sessions in the past, and that's not what it looks like. And I'm wondering, is the disconnect mine? Like, did I read something wrong? Like, where's the delta? I don't know.
I guess maybe a question back. When you say 8 units per lot, are you assuming a certain lot size? Because what we've done is looked at things as units per acre, and I think we're trying to do that conversion. So when I'm trying to understand the 8 units per lot, I think that's when we were talking about middle housing in the spring. Is that what you're referring to? I'm trying to recall.
No, there was a comp plan presentation, and we hadn't gotten into any of the different zones or development regulations yet. It was just like, here's our residential medium and here's our residential low, and there were here's what the zones inside of this are going to average out to be. And that is what I remember it being. And I'm wondering if my memory could have been better. I don't know what meeting that was, and didn't come prepared with that tonight.
I'm thinking perhaps, Christian, we have a couple slides coming up that would have some visuals on density for those types in different residential zones that might help.
I saw it, yeah.
Yeah, and we went through an exercise to look around the city within the existing either 2,800 or 4,000 or 5,400 current zoning, staying out of the downtown. I think Block D is 130 units per acre. So that's the most dense development we have, or one of the more dense developments we have. So some examples of what would be within the 25 to 37 units, existing developments. Obviously, these have been around for a while, built in 1969, 3 stories. The next one built in 78, 22 units per acre, again 3 stories. The heights within these zones are going to go up a little bit and allow for additional height, which I'll get to in a second. And then the last one here, the effective density of 25 units per acre, taking out some of the critical area spaces from how this was calculated. So that sort of those higher bands, I'll run back up to the density table just to keep it here. So the averaging of all those medium designations within the future land use map, the more orange color, that those we projected through the assumptions of what the current buildable area is or redevelopable area is at densities that are sort of scaled to what the current underlying is. So sort of sliding each one up and looking at those targets in order to hit our 12,000 some growth target in 20 years. And then the low density also bumping up a little bit.
Mayor, I think that you might be confused with the previous alternatives that were discussed. The neighborhood alternative was really like a lot higher density in the neighborhoods, and that I think maybe some numbers were thrown out. I kind of recall what you're talking about, and it was pretty early on in the discussions before the hybrid 2.5 alternative was selected. So
Okay.
yeah, I have a question about, you mentioned that the 5-year study is going to be really helpful to determine like, how's it going? What do we need to make changes on? Let's reevaluate, course correct. In the intermediate time, these two different options for proposed minimum density would present a challenge. So let's just say, for the sake of math that I can't do on Mike, is we have a 1/4 acre lot. So I'm dividing by 4 in RM2. So proposed minimum density option 2 is like it's an older home. It just needs to be remodeled. I'm flush with cash. Let's do it. So RM2, proposed minimum density option 2, on a 1/4 acre lot, that'd be a 4-plex. 8 divided by 2, 8 divided by 2 is, 8 divided by 4 is 2. No, it's a duplex, right?
You're talking on current.
No, proposed minimum density.
Oh, proposed minimum,
So a 1/4
okay.
acre lot is a 4th, so a 1/4 of 8 is 2. So that would be a duplex. That would be allowed under that potential option 2. But under potential option 1, a 1/4 of 25 is about 6-plex, right? And so we know that like oftentimes our development regulations, like setbacks and parking minimums and all the other accoutrement of development, add up into making it more, it's harder to build like higher or mid-scale development, like a 6-plex, 4-plex, and it requires, in order to like economically pencil out, developers are looking for additional bonuses in order to offset some of the things. So in the meantime, if we say the minimum is a 6-plex for your lot, and they're like, I can't do that because of parking, are we going to make exceptions to say reduce the parking, or are we going to make changes to our parking code to allow these proposed minimum densities and whatever? Like, what's the director's rule here? Are we saying we're going to compromise on our development accoutrement, all those other accessory requirements in order to achieve the minimum density? Or are we going to compromise on the minimum density and say it's okay for you to build a 2-plex or a...
Well, first and foremost, we're going to develop bulk regulations that would hopefully reflect the kind of densities we're talking about, setbacks, coverage, height, and I think we have a couple slides about that as well. There is a process to request variances from our code standards. That's a pretty high bar that usually has to go through a hearing examiner process. So I would prefer to build some incentives to encourage that density, and that can be through flexible parking. I would love to really incentivize more affordable, permanent affordable housing, and that could also be an option for reduced parking, especially in some of our medium density areas, which are transit rich and proximate to transit. So I think first and foremost, we'll make sure we craft the development regulations that reflect the kind of densities we want to see, but also have enough flexibility so that we can achieve things like parking reductions and also achieve affordable housing at the same time.
That makes sense, and I appreciate the complexity and nuance that comes with every development decision. So that's a good enough answer for me. But I'm also just wondering, minimum density requirements, are those in place in order to achieve the future vision, or is it in place to achieve minimum requirements due to tell me more about why we're putting in minimum density options.
Putting in a minimum helps when the lot configuration is, whether it's an infill, you have an infill 5,000 square foot lot, and building it to that density might might become difficult. So creating that, the maximum, so 50 units per acre, creating that minimum establishes some flexibility in what they could work through and scale it to fit with, ingress, egress, stormwater, parking, and all of those things.
So what I'm hearing is that for a complicated lot, let's say it's a parcel that's landlocked. I mean, every parcel is landlocked, but it's a landlocked parcel. It has a little flag, and so there's like basically no ingress, egress. Having minimum density would require that lot to. So if a developer comes forward with a lot and says, it's really hard to build, I'm just going to do a single family home and get rid of it. This minimum density option would say, no, you need to develop it with at least a floorplan or whatever, to the minimum density that we're requiring, or it not be developed.
Right, and putting in some provisions for how to maintain existing structures. The more, if a developer can have multiple parcels, the greater the footprint to work with, the more flexibility they create, where they can shift buildings, create some modulation, and work at the higher densities, especially with the slides upcoming on height and setback changes that create some of that flexibility that just isn't in the code at this point. So, yeah.
And since Councilmember Curd brought up parking, we, I know, are looking at addressing parking in our housing action plan afterwards. Is there any opportunity to do something like that in our development regulations that we're talking about now? And if you want to be like, Mayor, let us finish the freaking comp plan, that's okay too.
Parking's a sticky wicket, and it does often require a lot of analysis and thought to make sure we're taking the steps to establish something that will work for what the market wants to provide, what the community needs, and then how to integrate that with existing transit, and how the street system is set up. But it's on our near horizon with housing action plan, as well as with downtown. I mean, it's integrated into those next steps for us.
Okay.
Thanks. You said streets, and I thought about streets and a question that I had recently. A lot of the development in my time in Bothell has been very cul-de-sac-y, not a lot of through streets. Do we, as we look at changing our density, like I was doing some quick math that I also won't say on the microphone of like comparing the maximum to the current density figures, and there are some decent, jumps in consideration of the fact that our population is expected to just grow and we're already behind. But as we look at, like, are there places where we're saying, okay, here are large lots, we should have a road that goes through this completely versus like more cul-de-sac type development that kind of perpetuates a lot of people taking the same few through roads? Like, is that part of this whole process? Like, do we have a plan where it's like, okay, if this lot redevelops or these lots in this area, this road needs to come through or something like that? Or is that done like at project time?
I think we need to look at our future connections and what the transportation map shows, where there are those potential connection points. Larger sites, there may be internal roadways that could be installed, internal alleyways that could be installed, mid-block that serve them as well as provide, an additional access point. So it depends case by case, but also falling back on what the overall transportation plan and any street connectivity opportunities exist when they are there to punch a road through to connect to two street ends. We would look for that to happen.
Okay, thank you.
So height and coverage, proposed height for all the residential, the lower density residential zones going up 5 feet. The medium density going up either 5 or 10 or 20 feet, accommodating in the RM4 those additional densities. So you can get 5 stories, 4 to 5 stories out of an RM4 site and work with achieving those densities. Additionally, the coverage, so the section on the right, the proposed building coverage, so that's your building footprint, your total building footprint, and then your total hard surface coverage, bumping that up across the board, except for the residential conservancy. Those lots are already very, very large, and that was a no change area there. But identifying how each of those zones could accommodate additional coverage. We also removed the maximum accessory building coverage, which was a 5%, and that was it just pulled into all of these. What this does is it creates greater opportunity for ADUs, additional units on lower density lots with some additional flexibility in how much they can fit on site. Always they'd have to comply with stormwater regulations, so working with Public Works Engineering on those types of items. So this creates some of those additional flexibilities that can make that density happen.
Do you have analysis on parcels in the conservation zone in terms of their building coverage and hard surface coverage? Are they approaching 35%? Is that a kind of a normal value? How is that 35%? How did we originally come up with 35% there? Did you do any?
I'd have to look into that.
It feels really arbitrary, and I'm wondering if 35% for an area that we're intending to set aside as conservation land is still kind of high. And so if those percentages aren't even really up there, maybe I should stop talking and let Andrew talk.
we may have an answer. Andrew?
Oh, I just wanted to weigh in on this one because a lot of the dimensional regulations that we had included here are based on what's currently in the code, just to ensure that we're providing as light of a touch as possible in certain areas. So that 35% is generally representative from the R40, the current R40,000 zone. So it's not. We did not conduct a more detailed analysis that looked at stormwater runoff or the like. It was more of just trying to base those regulations as close as possible to what's currently in place.
I appreciate bringing in the legacy zoning and the legacy components of the plan, but I'm just also wondering going forward, we should really think about that 35%. If conservation lands are important to us and the intent of the conservation lands is not to be developed, then 35%, if it's kind of higher than what we're seeing out there, capping it down a little bit could be future-proofing some, incursion and degradation of those conservation lands. So just thought I'd add that.
I just want to note that the residential conservation is still, it's still very much, it can be developed under the context that a lot of them are encumbered by critical areas, and so all of those regulations continue to apply. So there's still protections in place to conserve a lot of the kind of ecological function of the area, or to protect against things like, if you're in the steep slopes, which is a lot of that kind of southern Bothell portion that's residential conservation. So there are still protections in place for that, and I think in maybe a later round, and by later round I mean in another phase, you could look at where those historically came from, or and whether you want to maybe make adjustments to them further. But all the other regulations are still there to protect those areas.
the critical areas and their associated buffers are the encumbrances that sort of are prohibitive of development more than, and maybe not this amount, but relatively low amounts of development on those larger lots.
Right, yeah, totally. And I know that the critical areas code is the last line of defense, sort of, but I'm also thinking like we're going to be having a lot of tree discussions coming up here in the next years. And if we allow hard surface coverage, more like if we're a little bit more excessive on our hard surface coverage and land that we intend by the zoning name to be conservation, like it should be conservation. We shouldn't just say residential conservation to protect really low density because somebody wanted it that way in 1980. So that's doesn't sound like we have a lot of change possibility for this based on the tunnel is coming forward really soon. So in the future, I'd just like to make sure that if we decide residential conservation is a necessary zone, we should know where the things come from in terms of like those, if we're changing, or if we're deciding to either change or not change the current, those coverages, or if they're arbitrary, like it'd be helpful to know. Thanks.
I'm going to jump in real fast while they jockey. To support what Councilmember Curd just said, like if it's going to be conservation, we should conserve it, not leave it the same way that it is right now, or maybe find a new name.
That was kind of my thing too. I wrote in my notes, why do we have residential conservation? Because it feels like, I can't think of the word, but like jumbo shrimp or whatever, like where it's, they seem to fight a little bit there. Like if it's conservation, why are people living there? Because people don't typically create good wildlife systems, right? Like, so I'm curious about that. I realize it predates everybody in this room, I think, working for the city, maybe one or two people, but I have a lot of questions about that. I also want to respect that, like, we're not going to like delay the comp plan to crack into RC, but I think in the future, I'd really like to understand that more and like what the goals are of that zoning that aren't served by critical areas regulations and like, how did we get here, sort of a deal.
I'm not, Councilmember. She hasn't spoken yet.
Jean, go.
Well, thanks, guys. I'll try to be fast. It sounds like we're just starting to go down a track that's a really big conversation with a lot of meat and ponderings to it. And I just want to throw this into the pot of maybe we should save this for later. In that when we talk about wanting to allow people to do things with their property that they want to and how they want to maximize it, if they sit on a piece of property that's got a little micro ecological system going on, and they value that, I think that's something that we should think about how we go about respecting that when we're talking about building up our density at the same time. And I don't know what that language would look like, but I just wanted to throw that out as a future pondering.
I'm moving on from the RC conversation. Similarly, though, is how do we arrive? Because I see, I'm a property owner. I know nothing about this stuff. I come in and look at this stuff because we're encouraging people to build, not just because a single duplex is not going to get built by a developer, maybe, likely, a small developer. But I'm looking at those numbers. And I don't know, as a council member, how do we arrive at this? Those values, because we increased. So the question is, did you do some math? I know you said you did some analysis to hit that projection, the overall projection number, and broken down by the different things, HB 1110, HB 1222, and all the other HBs. But how do we arrive at those numbers, Because they're so, did you round up or did you round down, to get to the 5% increase or a 10% increase, for example? And how did we, the baseline, which is the current, how was that arrived at? also.
Andrew?
I get all the great questions. So what we've been looking at here is how to implement the broader target that we have for, what the RM zones need to accommodate. And I think one important thing to note here is that, and I don't think this has come up yet, but by changing the zoning to essentially have different levels under the broad categories of the future land use map, what it means is that if there is future intensification that needs to be explored, it doesn't need to be done as part of a comp plan amendment. It can be done as a zoning change, which is significantly easier to do, and it isn't restricted to like the once per year, comp plan amendment docket. So when we were doing the calculations for this, I don't want to give you the impression that this is something that we're calculating to an immense amount of precision. We're looking at this on the basis of the areas under RL and RM, what generally the capacity we need from these areas are, and then also looking at what the current zoning is and getting an understanding about what could be accommodated with the fact that pretty much almost all of the land in Bothell is currently developed and subdivided. And if we're looking at intensification, we'd be looking at it at a looking at it considering what's currently in place and what's currently under how the areas are currently subdivided. All that being said, that's probably far too complicated. I think the point is that what we're trying to do is to cite development types with the heights that are necessary to get the development densities that we need to accommodate the targets that we've identified. So we were looking at kind of the initial spreadsheet model that we had developed to get to the HB 1220 targets, and then just trying to work with the individual zoning classifications to try to generally get to the capacity and the densities that we would need. So given that we're shooting for an average, RM1 is going to be lower, RM4 is going to be higher. What I should also note, though, is that once RM4 is pretty much as high as we can go without it going towards the development types that we would see in the downtown or in the mixed use areas. That would be, 4 to 5 story residential, higher density apartment buildings, condos, potentially. So I don't know if I've necessarily completely answered the question, but I think the point is that we looked at the spreadsheet calculations that we had done just for the broader RL and RM areas first, and then looked at some of the development scenarios that would be generally necessary to get to the targets that we have. The only other thing that I would add is that, as has been pointed out before, we're trying to figure out as well what the uptake will be from developers over time. They might really go for high levels of infill here, taking advantage of the density that's used. There may be some cases where, developers don't necessarily use all the capacity that's here in some of the zones. This is something, we're kind of entering a bit of uncharted waters here in the state with significant up zones. So we do want to understand that there's going to be some adjustments and room to maneuver over time.
Just summarize what I heard. What I heard is that even though we tried, this is uncharted territory. We made some assumptions, and based on our best estimates, we came up with those numbers. Like there's no, it's not precise algebra or calculus that was used to come up with a precise number. It's like, we think it's going to be like this based on our historical understanding of how development happens. We think it's going to be like this moving forward, and we're going to wait to collect some real world data to adjust as we move forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we were developing them on the basis of the modeling that we were doing of capacity for the future land use map. So it's not as if we were throwing darts at a dartboard by any means.
Yes.
But
yes.
I also want to be very upfront about the fact that we need to see how this works over time, and if upzoning may be necessary in certain areas or incentives or the like over time.
Councilmember Aldrichs.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if you'd be able to see my hand. I think I'm not the only one struggling to, I think, visualize what these proposals would actually look like and mean. And I really do appreciate Councilmember Curd's point about like, where do trees fit in here? And so I'm wondering if it's not too much to ask, would it be possible to show us some visuals that would compare like pick one of these lovely goldenrod colors and show us what current looks like in a schematic versus what we're proposing would look like, and take into account some of those like obvious things that are kind of underpinning all zoning regulations, like, well, I realize we're about to talk about setbacks next, but trees and roads and frontages, etc. Is that possible? And would that help? Like, I think that would help me, but to my colleagues, would that help you be able to better understand what these proposals are suggesting or describing?
Yes.
And staff can bring back at our November 5th meeting imagery, some examples. We could likely source existing projects and identify what does a 90% hard surface coverage site look like? What does it look like at 55 feet? And source some information to give some visuals on that.
I had a quick follow-up question to this conversation. I know we haven't, decoded the genome on figuring these things out yet, but like, have we run this by developers to say like, hey, are there any red flags? Like, does this look like something you could work with?
We haven't run these specific numbers by a large group of developers. I mean, we did discuss them with Planning Commission, noting that one of the commissioners is a developer. These are generally kind of in line with some of the guidance that's out there as well for being able to get the densities we're looking to get. But we haven't gone out to like a wider swath of the development community in Bothell and had them respond to this yet.
Okay. Just mostly making sure that like what we're proposing is feasible for the people that actually build the stuff.
I was gonna add to that. I think what we don't see right now, because we do see big developers doing big projects, what I would love to make sure is that these are in line in places where infill development happens, and it happens without like a lot of like, with a normal amount of building a project craziness, not like a crazy amount, if that makes sense. Like, does it make infill more possible? Because that really feels like the key to what we're trying to do. So that's when we talk about talking to developers, I really want to focus on that for a lot of these areas where we're expecting gradual change. Does that make sense? Okay. Also, when we talk about visuals, if we're comparing like 55% building coverage to 75%, I think talking about help us understand the trade-offs, right? Like, it's like bigger building. It's good to visualize that, but also, or wider or taller or whatever. But like, because we added this many more units, the cost was this, or just kind of like what the trade-off is. Because I think, just walk us through some of that. I think it's hard to put that all in perspective. I don't want to speak for the deputy mayor, but like, as someone who does not develop real estate, I think sometimes looking at this in the abstract and then looking at buildings, it's like, oh wow, everything is bigger and larger, and that's not the Bothell I remember. But also, like, what is the trade-off? I think is a really important thing for us to look at too.
I just want to mention one thing in terms of running this by the development community. We do have a development services advisory group that has not met in a while as we've been in the race to finish the draft. So there is still an opportunity to get that feedback. We frankly wanted to make sure we presented this to the City Council first and to Planning Commission first. I think there could be time to get that feedback in short order, and we can loop back on their reactions.
And I want to be clear, you guys are doing a great job of running this by people. Like the public engagement, just the lists is really impressive. So please don't feel like it's like, how did you miss this? It's like, we're coming up with ideas, but you're also doing a great job.
All right, I do want to touch on setbacks real quick. We've shifted a little bit with front yards. Following the current setback of 20, shifting that for the structure itself. The garage would still maintain that 20-foot setback, but structures could come forward of that, could come proud to the garage. That allows a lot of flexibility. It assumes a 20-foot parking stall or just general driveway for if there are garage doors, and this is on a traditional street fronting the house fronting the street. So we reduced those down slightly. Sides, reduced them down to 5 feet. Currently, it's a 5 foot, but you have to combine an equal 15. So you typically would see a 5 foot setback on one side, 10 on the other. So reducing that, creating a bit more flexibility. And then for rear yards, this gets a little bit interesting because we threw in if there's no alley, so you just backyard to backyard, it maintains pretty much for the residential the same 15-foot setback. For the medium density, it drops it down to 10, which currently they're at 15s or 25s. If there's an alleyway and your building is going to run up, your building could run up to that alleyway. If there's a garage, you would need, and those doors are parallel to the alley, you would need those doors pulled back at least 3 feet so that you could make the turn into the space. There are flexibilities for all setbacks to reduce or adjust within the code that allow for shifting it to retain vegetation or to work with the unique topography. Those have some trade-offs. You shift the building closer on one side and further away on the other, and those will still be in play for these as well.
Similar to the previous slides, to me, the numbers seem arbitrary again. Like, why did we have an original 15-foot setback? No, I know, but like, I think we need to start thinking we're making big decisions for 20 years. I mean, I think we need to understand why. Maybe we don't need to understand the past because none of us were around in the past, but in the future, making deliberate things. And I understand that data we get from development. That's why maybe having developers give us, when you talk to the advisory group, maybe that's an initial survey data point to tell us whether we're on the right track or not. And then you can get real world data from the building over the next 5 years because that's the first report.
Sure.
But that's my initial reaction to this. From even before when I looked at the old stuff, it's like, why do we have 15-foot setbacks? Like, if I want to build a house, rebuild why do I need to do this? Type thing.
And it can depend on jurisdiction. Sometimes it's deeper rear setbacks because they valued backyards, creating that space. It could tie directly to how much coverage you could have on a property. So once you kind of take away all of the setbacks, that kind of works with what your coverage could be.
I understand, but this is where now you let supply and demand figure it out. Mm-hmm. Like, if you impose a restriction that maybe supply and demand today has adapted to the old restrictions, but if you reduce the restrictions, not eliminate it, reduce it, then maybe supply and demand will change. The market will change in the next 20 years to accommodate for this. Maybe there will be people who want less yard. Maybe there were people who want even more yard and smaller house, type thing.
To put a finer point on that question, is when we talk about like the impermeable surface coverage and setbacks and things like that, is there something in our council goals that we are trying to accomplish with those regulations? Or is it just kind of like we've always had them, so we're going to make them a little less?
I'm not sure I could speak to the council goals. I mean, setbacks generally provide light and air and space for trees and vegetation to find that balance, which were established at some point. So it is a bit of a push and pull. How much, what's your tree density, your tree canopy growth? Definitely something that we'll talk about with the urban forestry management plan coming up. But there are generally those factors.
But just because there's a setback doesn't mean there's a tree there. Right?
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah. It seems arbitrary. I like that the restrictions are getting lower. We have Councilmember Alders.
Thanks for seeing me. This one is this slide is more straightforward to me than some of the others. I think because I can picture what this would look like in real life. And I think these recommendations are making sense to me. I do want to just kind of hear from staff what the Planning Commission said about this particular slide. Can you summarize what that discussion was like? Thank you.
Yeah, Planning Commission had no questions about it. They appreciated the adjustments, creating the opportunity for the increased density. Talked about how it would, on residential low lots, it would create the opportunity for ADUs to be constructed in a rear yard, and have some of those flexibilities built in, just looking at setbacks alone. But then once you look at height and coverage, those sort of combined to allow for that opportunity to build those infill, build missing middle within those lower density zones, and then also allow for greater flexibility within the higher density zones, and expanding that building envelope by 5 or 10 feet is significant when you've got, especially when you've got heights that you can achieve to accommodate for parking and the floors needed.
Thank you for summarizing that. I feel good about this.
Councilmember Zorns?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. For many years, even before I was on city council, I sat in on discussions on, I thought I heard somebody ask about what the history was on those setbacks on the backyards, and how they came to be. And I will tell you, as they were being framed up, my recollection was people were valuing a measure of privacy so that people could plant landscape in there that would give them some shelter from somebody looking directly in their windows. And the problem is you get buildings closer and closer together. Anybody who gardens, I don't know who all gardens, is that you get less and less available daylight that can support, let alone the soil that can support plant life. So besides just a backyard where you could put a patio and go hang out at, the viability of being able to support plant life becomes less and less the closer and smaller those setbacks become. So it's a trade-off, and everybody's going to have to think about is what's worth the trade-off, and is there something that you can do to modify and have some of both.
I was just going to say, I really appreciated that, the history. I think it's also important to remember these are like minimums. Nothing is requiring that people do this. So as we talk about, I own a property, I want to build something. If I want a patio or a garden, I'm going to have space for that. And I would probably buy it in a zone, you know, I live in a pretty low density zone and that works for my family. I just wouldn't want to, I like that this gives more options to more people, because if we try to codify the kind of life that Amanda likes or that Karsten likes, or I'm not going to pick on any more people, sorry, Councilmember Curd, but then it gets hairy, right? Then we don't see a lot of variety in our community and a lot of different life stages supported. So I like that this creates more opportunity while also allowing a lot of what we already enjoy in Bothell. That's kind of my take on it. The history is helpful.
I think I'm wondering if, not to belabor this slide because we've been on it for a while, but are there any alleys outside of downtown? I don't think so. And so low residential zones wouldn't really benefit from, there's no difference between the current and the future in low residential zones. So saying that ADUs could now be supported because of reduced rear yard setbacks in low residential zones is not entirely accurate, right? Unless I'm missing something and there are alleys or there is a process for alleys.
You're right, and I guess I was really referring to the sides and the front, just allowing for the house to be pulled forward and creating some flexibilities on the side setbacks there.
Yeah, the side setbacks, I feel like during the conversations about middle housing and what can we tweak in order to make sure that it is more sustainable, or it works with saving trees or stormwater facilities or other like benefits, public benefits on private property. I think that those side yard setbacks, that flexibility adds a lot to that. But in terms of like housing capacity and allowing people to do with what they want on their property in terms of their housing capacity, I don't think that these rear yard setbacks changes are really viable in the low residential areas. So would there be additional like benefit to creating an ADU in a low residential zone, or are like these dimensional standards, this isn't the like be all end all for ADUs, right?
There are flexibilities for ADUs to reduce a rear setback up to 10 feet. So theoretically, they could go to 5 feet, but there's some offsets that they'd have to provide on the opposite side without getting into the details.
Okay, thanks.
I have one thing that I forgot when I was talking earlier. I wanted some clarification on the additional setback for garages. Like we were looking at 10-foot setbacks, but 20 for garages. Help me understand that.
Yeah, so currently the front of a home would be required to be set back 20 feet from the front property line.
Mm-hmm.
The draft proposes to, in the residential logo, to 15 and the others go to 10. So the other portion of the structure, it could be a unit, it could be the front of the home, it could project 10 feet forward in the RM1.
I get that, but like why? Why do garages have to be 20?
So the door has space.
Yeah.
The garage door, sorry. Some of them.
Oh,
swing
like if
out
the door
too.
swings up and out? Is there a way to write that in the development standards without additional setbacks? Just saying, hey, if you've got a garage that kind of swings out, like it can't swing past your property line, or there's like a 10-foot setback for the garage door when it extends?
Yeah, and generally it's for a vehicle to park without projecting out into the right of way and causing a hazard. So following a kind of a standard parking stall depth.
So we're really just requiring 2 additional parking spots in front of the garage? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what it's typically been, how it's typically developed, yes.
I have no problem if somebody wants to develop their home that way. I'm just not sure why we're mandating that. Like additional setbacks for garages, I guess I just don't understand what the point is.
So there wouldn't, if I understand correctly, there wouldn't be a requirement to build a garage. So to your point of requiring people to build their home that way, they wouldn't have to. And if you choose to have a garage, that it would have to accommodate so that a vehicle would be in the driveway for those times when your garage is not so clean.
Correct. Yeah, you still have to park you still have to meet the minimum required parking for a single home, which is 2 parking stalls, which is a 20 by 20 parking pad, which could access a garage or just be part of the home, which is how which kind of leads back to parking.
So you could have 2 parking spots go all the way to the street in the form of a driveway, but if you cover them, you have to move them 20 feet back.
Does a carport have the 20 feet? Is a very related question. Sorry to interrupt.
I believe so, because it could then be enclosed, and then that would not meet the current 20-foot setback. And we're just maintaining that current 20-foot setback for the garage, and based on what the current homes, the entire structure setback is.
As we look at our housing action plan to eliminate parking minimums in the city, is there anything in here that we wish we would have gone back and done differently if we do that in the spring?
I mean, I think that anything that we're doing now, we have an opportunity to revisit with the housing action plan. I don't think that, for example, having certain parking standards now precludes us from making adjustments in the spring. Should we feel that there are adjustments needed for minimums or for location, for example?
I would like you guys to do as little work on them right now as possible, because I would like them to go away in the spring, and I don't want you spending a bunch of work on something that's not going to be relevant. I would be in support of not treating the garage separately from everything else, but it's also not something that I want to spend a lot more talking about at 9:30 at night.
I agree. The only question is, which you made me think, is when we come back to this in the spring, are we going to be required to change some comp plan stuff? Because we talked about parking, garage, all that thing.
Initially, my thought is no, because we've created policies here that are broad enough that allow us to revisit code and zoning code that will not force us to revisit the comprehensive plan every time we need to do that. So it should be a simpler process.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, I think I've got 2 more slides to run through. I know that's a lot. So there's 3 slides. This one, I need to toggle back and forth between the future land use map. So part of the big approach to this work was considering the creation of these mixed use zones. So these are born out of the centers alternative, which merged to create the preferred. So the mixed use neighborhood, mixed use community, employment, and so on. So these were originally going to be inserted in as zones. The complexity that created was insurmountable with the time that we have. So part of phase 2 is to come back and turn these, what we're going to propose as overlays, will become zones. So it's a little bit of we need to take this step to reach the other. These proposed heights are what we brought forward, what were in various attachments within the comp plan. They identify heights that might fit within the current range. For example, I'm sure everyone sees 85 feet. Okay, that's pretty tall, but the mixed use employment, that's the deep purple on this map. The deep purple, so say for instance, North Creek, it already allows a height to go up to around 150 feet in some areas. So it's always going to be the greater height that applies, but these overlays will be applied wherever these overlay areas are proposed aligning with the future land use map, because it was just going to be quite complicated to create the new zones, remove the old zoning, make sure we didn't miss anything. And that is part of phase 2 next year with just some general code cleanup. And these FARs as well, the floor area ratio, you've got 10,000 square feet and you have a proposed FAR of 3. That means you can do 30,000 square feet on that site. You can't go corner to corner, but that's what your maximum would be. So fit that 30,000 square feet within your 60-foot height or whatever the established designated center range gives you if it's higher.
Are we required by the state to limit FAR?
We aren't. It's just a mechanism to look at mass, bulk and mass, and
I guess I just
and we
don't
currently
understand,
have it.
Sorry, go ahead.
And we currently have it within.
Yeah, no, I know that.
We bumped it up within these.
I guess I just don't understand, like, if you've got a lot and we already have height limits and we already have minimum setbacks and we already have the impervious surface coverage, I don't understand the point of a further limiter. Like, it seems like we've got kind of all the stuff we would have worried about covered, and then we just add another limitation on top of that just 'cause.
So yes, it is a further limitation. I was just gonna go look at the kind of what the setbacks are in those, in the non-residential zones that these overlays would apply to. But it is essentially another kind of way of managing the bulk of a building.
Yeah, and limiting the bulk of a building, limiting what people can build.
I was going to ask as you were looking into that, or did you have a follow-up question?
I was just curious. I mean, my next question was just going to be, like, have we taken and looked and figured out, like, if we developed a property without the FAR, like, what FAR would be possible? Like, how much is it limiting it, I guess, would be my question.
Yeah, for those upper height allowances, 150 feet, you're definitely going to look. You'd see much more massing. So it forces the design to accommodate for that, and prevents 10 stories built to the setbacks. Whereas if you're utilizing the FAR, it's going to create some variability in the design. It's going to create some scaling and interest in the structure rather than just going straight up at the setbacks.
I guess I just don't understand, because we already regulate the setbacks and the height. So if I'm doing my math right here, like, if we talk, mixed use centers, I think that's what C means, and we have a 60-foot height limit, let's just say 10 feet per story. So we can go up 6 stories in that. And if the proposed FAR is 3, that means you can only build it on half the lot, right?
I'm sorry, I was calculating a different number when you said those. Can you say that again?
Absolutely. And I could be doing this wrong.
Okay.
So as I understand FAR, so if we look at like mixed MUC, mixed use centers, is that what that means?
Mixed use community.
Commercial. Awesome. Thank you. I can pick a few other words too. So if we, let's just say 10 feet per story, because it makes the math easy. So let's say we could build a 6-story building there. We could only put it on half of the lot if the FAR was regulated at 3, right? Because the floor area ratio is basically like take the entire lot space and now you can triple it, and that's how much square footage you have, right?
With 0 setbacks.
Yeah, and that also assumes so that if there's a higher FAR allowed in the underlying zoning, this does not preclude that from.
Yeah.
From.
No, but so is the FAR taken off of the total lot area? Oh, Andrew.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I think one other thing to note here is that for a lot of development, surface parking is pretty efficient to use from an economic, like fiscal perspective. So that's something else that can factor into how much of the site is used. But yeah, I'll defer to Jesse and Kristin on all the other comments. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Awesome. From a fiscal perspective, we had Urban 3 come out, and surface parking doesn't perform well for us, but it certainly does for the developer for making parking. Is FAR calculated, Kristin, you said something with the setbacks, is it calculated on the entire lot or the lot that you can actually build on once we have setbacks?
The entire lot.
Okay.
Area.
Okay. So if you can build 6 stories, you have the setbacks, but you can only build half of the total lot area within the setbacks regardless of any other parts of the zoning with the FAR. I'm probably not I'm probably not asking this question very well. It seems like a big limiter to me on this.
I mean, this can be one of those things that we seek out input from the development group and see what their thoughts are. As Andrew said, yeah, parking on these much larger scaled sites, once you take out setbacks and circulation, even if they're doing internal parking, there's a lot of land lost, especially with vegetative buffers, which might be even greater than their setback needs. So they do end up stacking up much higher, but we can come back with some visuals and some input hopefully from.
And I guess just, you mentioned earlier, without this, people could just build all the way up to the height and all the way out to the setbacks, the whole thing. And I don't understand why that would be a problem. We've got the height limits, we've got the setbacks. If somebody wants to build the biggest building they can, I don't know why we would add another limiter. And I just want to make sure that if that other limiter is there, it's as insignificant as possible. Yes.
Slight pivot, and that was a lot. I'm interested to learn more. I think with FAR, what I think about is I was on the planning commission when we did the Canyon Park sub-area plan, or at least the tail end of it, because it was a very long sort of deal. But there was a minimum FAR because it's a regional growth center and we don't want it to be low density because it's supposed to do a thing and grow. So I would love to also look at FAR in certain parts of the city that are supposed to be centers especially for commercial activity as a minimum to help make sure that things are happening the way that we're kind of planning for them to do.
And those were untouched. So if there was an established minimum, we didn't.
Okay, maybe when it comes back as zoning versus an overlay, maybe we can get a good level set on that and really. I hesitate to say really dive in because we're already diving in, but just kind of refresh on that stuff.
I'm wondering too if knowing where we're at in the calendar, if perhaps some briefings ahead of that council meeting might be something we would want to consider to be able to talk through some of the scenarios and make sure that what then comes back and is presented. So that we'll take a note of that and look at the schedule and the opportunity of potentially doing some additional information for council.
I think you have a council that has been looking forward to getting through the comp plan so we can start talking about the development regulations, and sorry about your evening.
Well, it's actually worth mentioning. I mean, this is a lot, admittedly, and it's not something that is typical for cities to do at the same time as the comprehensive plan. A new bar has been set by the legislature based on 1220 in particular to have a lot of the basic regulations in place essentially at the same time as the comprehensive plan. So in a perfect world, we would have been able to move forward with the comprehensive plan and then really take our time. And I think what we're trying to do here is to take care of those basics concurrently. So it is a lot to absorb. It's a lot for us to communicate as well.
Yeah. If I am not convinced that we need to regulate FAR. So if you guys wanted to take that out, it'd be fine with me. Like we already say you can only build this high. You have to have these particular setbacks. You have to park this many cars. We have all these rules that restrict it. So just let somebody build that with all those restrictions and not add another one would be my take. Councilmember Aldrich.
Thank you. I would second that. After this discussion, I'm coming to the same conclusion as well about FAR, that with the other restrictions already in place, this may be further limiting in a way that is not necessary. Thank you.
And just to clarify, the current height says 35 to 150. The 150, but I don't see it in the proposed. Are we changing the height limits as well?
The 35 to 150 ranges under the designated centers. This kind of got into the complexity of trying to redo all of the zones. We aren't touching those. So if the current designated center, if the proposed overlay is within one of those, we look to see which is the more permissive and go with that. In order to hit the targets, which is what we have to adopt this year, we could always do other extra things next year or at a later date.
And by the way, we totally understand that we're not just in the middle of a comp plan. We're in the middle of a comp plan where we're totally changing the way we do this, with the underlying comp plan and then the zoning on top of it, and we're redoing all of our zones. So it's a lot of work, and we understand. And
just a note that a lot of developers do tend to like FAR as a way to kind of calculate their likely space that they can put on a property just for their economic kind of purposes. So there's some value to it, but it is kind of a regulating in with the other pieces that are already in place.
Is there a way that we could calculate the maximum FAR given the other restrictions that we have and then give them a range so they could still have that information to look at, but without the restriction? And it probably depends on lot size because a 10-foot setback around a smaller lot is going to take up a higher percentage than a bigger lot. But if there's a way we could give them that information and not have the restriction, I would love that. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor.
No, I hear you. I think what I'm hearing is that they have spreadsheets. They just plug in the numbers and does it pencil out or not, So if we mess them up too much, with that sound effect.
It's like everything else. Somebody's got an Excel spreadsheet somewhere that's holding the world up.
But I agree that we need to reduce the amount of restrictions that we impose on developers.
Yeah, I think we can at least come up with some ranges that make sense. Whether those are regulated or whether they're guidance, we can discuss. I also do want to circle back with our transportation team to make sure that the modeling assumptions they made for impact analysis would still be covered. For example, if maximum FAR were eliminated, if their assumptions would still be valid based on height restrictions, setback restrictions in terms of the maximum build out of the city and the assumptions that we made. So I think that it's something that we can certainly do. And also to Councilmember Dodd's point in terms of minimum FARs, we do have those in Canyon Park. We also have those in North Creek. So we do establish sort of a minimum threshold to get to our jobs targets. And just knowing that, I think it's important to recognize that we agree that removing restrictions to achieve growth in the city is really essential to get to our jobs targets, but we also do have minimum thresholds as well. And those are somewhat limiting sometimes.
I feel like FAR actually makes a lot more sense as a minimum threshold because it's kind of a we don't care how you get there, just get there sort of metric. It's the overall thing. But in terms of the maximum, we really care how you get there, and we have all these other restrictions that restrict maximum. So I feel like FAR is a good restrictive minimum because it allows people a lot of flexibility in terms of how to get there. But we already restrict every other part of the building envelope, so. I like it as a minimum, I just want to say.
All right. I'm gonna jump to my last slide. This sort of covers just a few other cleanup items. The only ones required on here on this short list would be the unit lot subdivision. So adding that into our subdivision code, creating the ability for ADUs or attached or detached to be divided off from an individual home. So you identifying the area underneath that lot or that unit to be sold off. That is a requirement. The definitions, there's a few things that we added in there on permanent supportive housing, emergency housing, transitional housing, a few other definition cleanups that were required. We did update and go with the community input on calling it the Midtown sub area. So changing it from, it's a series of names, Red Barn, Lake Pleasant, Country Village. So going with what the community seemed to identify as going with Midtown, that's updated. And then we updating on our impact fees for ADUs, scaling them to the size of that ADU. The other things on here, removing minimum circle lot diameter, that was a sort of a interesting standard that nobody seemed to like. Just made it so that you had to have a lot of a certain certain circle had to fit within that lot. So lots were buildable. It's still a standard that they'd have to design a lot that works with the lot sizes change, the density changing, and allows for a lot more flexibility in what those can be. And then the neighborhood scale retail, so the corner store, we're working through developing a definition for that to make sure that we're hitting it correctly, and we'll bring that back in November, but including that as far as an allowed use within those medium density zones, and trying to make sure that it's very, very clear what we want and get that back to you.
And I assume that childcare isn't there because there's not really a question on the development regulations because of it?
Right, it's already allowed within residential zones.
Councilmember Zorns.
I bet you all are looking forward to winding this evening down. I have a couple of questions that are related to the development regulation. May I ask them? One was, I noticed on page 309 and 398, you removed, because RCW required removing households of more than 6 persons language, or just removing that kind of limiting language. I have a question related to that. I noticed I went and looked up the RCW and it said that the exceptions are occupant load per square foot. Are we going to set that standard? Tulish.
So I think you're referring to removing the restriction on unrelated occupants
right.
living together.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's essentially that it would be regulated by building code instead. So fire code and the building code. I believe it's in there. I haven't looked at the building code in great detail in a while, but.
Okay, so that's good to hear, and I don't want to go snitching on neighbors, so I'm not going to give particulars. I just know of a particular house that has 5 to 6 unrelated people living in the house, and they've taken out the family room and put another it's downstairs, and put a little kitchenette, stove, refrigerator, that kind of stuff in there, so there's no family room now. And upstairs, they took out the living room and turned it into a bedroom. So it's a house that's very intensive in its use on having bedrooms and cooking areas. And so I don't know, when there's those modifications that happen on a house, how does the city make sure that that's a safe place for X number of people to be living in.
For any development activity that requires a permit, we would expect to see a permit and review it.
Okay.
We don't have a requirement to identify how many persons might be living in a home. But
except would you then also assess how many people per square foot per fire code? Then
we could evaluate that on a case-by-case basis if it were of a concern, I believe.
okay, because I did see in the RCW that was something that was permitted, was to look at occupants per square foot. So I don't want to get super, I was just going to say a very loaded word and say Nazi about it. I don't want to get super, what's a good word? Someone help me here. I don't want to get super regulatory on it and restrictive on it, but at some point there has to be a point where we go, I'm thinking of another case that I heard where just outside of our city limits, there is a landlord who is putting multiple families of immigrants into apartments, and unless if somebody's pointing their finger at it, these immigrants don't know that they're living in really tight, what most people here in the States would find unacceptable ways of living. And so I hope that we have a way of watching and safeguarding people and their living conditions.
Councilmember
second
Stearns,
question.
we'd be happy to follow up more on that. But the bottom line is that we do have a complaint-based system. So our code enforcement is not built around monitoring proactively. It is a response base, and there are limits to the enforcement ability that we have within that. But I'm happy to talk to you more about the concern.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We just need to make sure that we don't set it up so that it's that we have the proper parameters in there so that it's hard to create conditions that go undetected for long periods of time unless somebody's pointing it out. My second question is for a constituent about the flume map. Pat Ewing and Ann Agard met with Jason and Kirsten this spring about the flume, the future land use map, and had been assured that critical areas were going to be added to it. She thought that had not been done yet. And so my question is, if it hasn't been done yet, will it be, or was a different decision made?
The flu map is generally, as we've discussed, an overall policy map that provides land use designations for the city. I do recall meeting with Ms. Agard, I believe it was in the spring of 2023, actually. And I don't recall representation I made with regard to critical areas, but we do have other maps that have policy weight in the comprehensive plan that do show those.
Okay, yeah, I saw there's some great maps in there, and I really enjoyed looking at them. And I was wondering if that's what would happen. So I'll pass that message on. Thank you.
Just adding that the critical areas, the regulations are essentially overlays on the overall zoning map, and so that there are some maps for critical areas in the natural environmental element in the comp plan.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Mankey?
Thanks. Just one quick question. Doesn't need to be tonight, but I'm curious to see if I can see a map of the future land use map that clearly designates the different areas between residential medium 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm just curious to see what that looks like and where those are located within the RM section of that map.
Yeah, we'll be developing that zoning map to accompany the final round of review for this.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, I had one more thing that I haven't gotten to, and I think then I'm good. The the residential medium 1 seems to have a lot of overlap with the residential low 2. And I'm wondering if we could somehow just roll, like instead of having residential medium 1, just have residential the 2, 3, and 4 and combine the first 2 into 1.
So you're saying the low 2 and medium 1
They're
feel
very like
too similar.
the medium 1 feels low to me. Like, is there a way we could, I mean, maybe like just essentially get rid of that and combine 1 and 2 into the new lowest designation of medium?
We can definitely look at that. We can also look at maybe increasing some of the changes in the medium 1 to make them to differentiate them a little bit more.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you. So I don't want to belabor this because while all of you feel like it is late for you, I am an hour ahead of you on the map. I appreciate, I don't understand what the circle lot diameter is, which if you wanted to explain it to me, you could put it in an email because you do not need to explain it to me tonight. But then the Midtown sub area is a really interesting, my only comment is really the Midtown sub area is an interesting thought to me. And so is that what the planning staff is going with from now on, that we're going to have a new neighborhood name? Or can we still have opinions on that?
We inserted it based on input from the community, is how it landed with Midtown.
We did conduct a survey and outreach to the community, and that's the feedback that we received. But certainly if the council wants to discuss it further, that's certainly fine with staff.
I'd be curious to see the community feedback that because this is the first time I'm hearing about community feedback bringing this idea forward, and so I'd love to be able to read more about what folks said. I'm not saying that we need to do something different. I just am wondering how we came to this.
I have one last thing to say tonight, which is that when you are coming up with your definition for corner stores, your definition is going to be very different from every one of our definitions. And you can save yourself a whole lot of heartbreak if you ask us ahead of time what our vision is for that, or if you have community feedback on corner stores before workshopping a definition with us in a study session. Just throwing that idea out there.
Us opinions, never. Does anybody have anything left that they need to get off their chest before I adjourn this thing?
I didn't make a bridge too far jokes while you were talking.
I'm very proud of you. All right, we're adjourned.